Hola, ¿qué tal? Muy buenas tardes. Bienvenidos a la quinta y última jornada del Enlighted Virtual Edition 2020, la conferencia mundial más importante sobre educación, tecnología e innovación. ¡Qué semana, eh! Hemos respondido a cuestiones fundamentales, preguntas y retos, pero todavía tenemos más. Ayer analizábamos la actualidad, el futuro y los desafíos de la educación superior y hoy terminaremos nuestro viaje adentrándonos en el mundo de los emprendedores y la edtech. ¿Son las startups las verdaderas ganadoras de esta crisis? ¿Qué caminos se abren ante nosotros tras el coronavirus? ¿Son tiempos para emprender en educación? Esto es Enlighted 2020. Son las 4 de la tarde. En apenas 4 días que hemos estado aquí, hemos asistido a una verdadera celebración del conocimiento. Hemos tenido la oportunidad de escuchar a los mejores, pero aún no hemos terminado. Hoy hemos llegado al último capítulo de esta edición y lo hacemos con sabios, con personas brillantes, con los que más saben. Y además celebramos los Enlighted Awards, unos premios para las mejores startups del mundo en materia de educación, de innovación y de tech. Y todavía hay más, porque para clausurar este Enlighted 2020 tendremos con nosotros al Premio Princesa de Asturias 2019 de Cooperación Internacional, Salman Khan, pero vamos a ir paso por paso. Primero tenemos una importante cita con los emprendedores y la edtech. Hablar de ganadores y perdedores siempre es delicado, pero en el caso de las startups y la edtech podríamos decir que la cosa cambia, porque si este tipo de empresas ligadas a la innovación salen victoriosas de la crisis, ganamos todos. Y hay buenas noticias. Desde los inicios de la pandemia se han puesto en marcha multitud de proyectos con beneficio social. Empresas que piensan en ayudar a los demás, pero no como una estrategia para reorientar su negocio, sino como una oportunidad de marcar la diferencia. ¿Y cómo lo hacen? Pues esa es la pregunta. Y para responder a esa pregunta y a muchas otras preguntas, hoy nos acompañarán algunos de los emprendedores más importantes del mundo, responsables de las principales plataformas educativas del planeta. Llevan liderando prácticamente desde sus orígenes una corriente que marca el futuro de cada vez más personas, la del emprendimiento y la edtech. Jeff Mayoncalda, nuestro primer invitado, pertenece a este grupo de pioneros. Es el director ejecutivo de Coursera, una compañía dedicada a transformar nuestra vida a través de la enseñanza. Y para hablar con él tenemos con nosotros a Lucía Figar, jefa de innovación corporativa de IE University. Jeff, Lucía, welcome to Enlighted 2020.
Hello, Jeff. Thank you for taking part in Enlighted 2020. We know it's a little bit early in Mountain View, California, so your presence is highly appreciated by all of us. Please go ahead with your presentation, and maybe I can ask you a few questions later.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Marta. I'm going to share my screen, and when I do, I think my camera will go off, but hopefully my screen will share.
Ups, parece que hemos tenido un pequeñito problema de conexión, Lucía, con esa conexión con Jeff Mayoncalda. Fíjate, Lucía, porque hace un momento decíamos que Jeff Mayoncalda es uno de los grandes. Creo que ya lo tenemos, que ya lo hemos recuperado. Mr. Mayoncalda, can you hear us?
I can. Are we ready? Can you see my screen?
Yeah,
go
I can.
ahead.
Please, go ahead.
Can you see my screen? Great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Jeff Mayoncalda. I'm the CEO of Coursera, and I would love to talk about the transformation of digital education. And it's been a very challenging time, but it has been very rewarding to see how higher education has come together on the Coursera platform and on other platforms to help higher education rise to the challenge. Before I start, I want to tell you a little bit about Coursera. We see ourselves as a learning ecosystem. The company was started by two professors from Stanford, Daphne Kohler and Andrew Ng, and we see ourselves as really a platform that brings together learners and educators and institutions. We now have 72 million learners in the world, many in Europe, many in the US, but 80% of the learners are outside of the United States. On the educator side, we have 150 of the top universities and now 50 industry partners. These are companies who have authored courses on Coursera. And the reason that they are interested in putting courses on Coursera is because they want to teach the world. They want to reach learners individually and through institutions so that they can extend their ability to reach and teach anywhere in the world. And then the final piece is institutions. 5 years ago, Coursera launched Coursera for Business. That was followed by Coursera for Government. And then just last year in October, we launched Coursera for Campus. This is a version of Coursera where our partners' courses, online courses, are available to any college or university in the world. So Coursera really sits in the center of an ecosystem that brings together learners and educators and over 6,000 institutions. We partner with some of the top universities. Many are in the US, many are in Europe, and we also are proud to partner with some of the best institutions in Spain, who together have authored over 100 courses natively, and we've also translated over 1,500 courses into Spanish. So there's a fairly broad catalog of Spanish language content on Coursera as well. I mentioned that we have 72 million learners. This is how they're spread around the world. North America, Asia, Europe, and Latin America are our biggest presences. We have 1,300 learners in Spain. And in the last 12 months, things have grown very rapidly. We've actually doubled from 5 million to 10 million in India. Europe has grown about 50%. And the number of learners in Spain on Coursera has grown slightly less than that, at 43%. We partner with some of the best industry partners who also author courses on Coursera. And Coursera is also hired by some of the leading companies in the world who are using Coursera and our partners' courses to upskill and reskill their workforces digitally. The catalog has been growing over the years. Since we started in 2012, the catalog has grown to over 4,500 courses, mostly in business and technology and data science. Business, technology, and data science, those are the three domains that most businesses are interested in using to upskill and reskill their employees. In January of 2019, we launched our health initiative. We now have, with our partners, over 500 healthcare courses and a couple of public health degrees on Coursera as well. In addition to courses, we have projects. I'll mention that in a second. And we have over 150,000 lectures from professors that are embedded inside of these courses. So really, there's over 150,000 unique lecture videos from some of the top professors and minds in the world. And the way that this content is put together on Coursera is stackable. So many people are familiar with open MOOCs. These are the open courses that people can take. There are over 4,500 courses our provider partners have put on. And you can take any of these lectures for free. If you want to get a certificate, that usually costs about $49. We also have series of courses, we call them specializations, that teach a skill in a bit more detail. We have professional certificates that largely come from our industry partners. And we now have more than 20 of our partners delivering fully accredited online master's degrees and bachelor's degrees on Coursera. These are not Coursera degrees. These are degrees from the University of Pennsylvania, HEC Business School in Paris, the University of Illinois, University of Michigan, and many others like Imperial College of London and University of London. They are fully delivered online, and when the student finishes, they get a diploma from the university itself. And then recently we launched projects. These are hands-on projects that complement courses, so you can learn the theory in a course and actually build a project online in something that we call Coursera Labs, and I'll describe Coursera Labs in a moment. When people talk about stackability, it's very valuable because offering a part of a degree or part of a course open and for free is a great way to attract new students to a course or to a degree program, but it's also a learning strategy. Many people aren't ready to take a full degree. They want some of the foundational learning. And by allowing people to come in for just one course that they can try for free, they can not only engage and get to know the professor and the institution, but they can also learn some of the foundational material that is required to take a full degree program. So we think of stackability as a marketing strategy. We also think of it as a learning strategy. I also would like to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of collaboration between industry partners and university partners. For many individuals, they do not have a college degree and they are in jobs that are likely going to be automated. And so they're looking to transition their careers. We've been working with a number of industry partners to build professional certificates for entry-level jobs that do not require a college degree and do not require any background in the field. The first professional certificate that we launched was with Google in January of 2018. It teaches somebody online who has no college degree or any background in computers the skills that it takes to be an IT support professional. There are many, many open IT support jobs. These are digital jobs with good careers and good pay, and many people are looking to transition into IT jobs. This 5-course series is designed to be delivered entirely online for people with no college degree. Since we launched with Google in 2018, we have had over 320,000 enrollments into the Google IT certificate. Over 60% of the students do not have a college degree. About 60% identify as Black, Latino, female, or veteran, and almost half of them report earning less than $30,000 a year. So it's a very low-cost, affordable on-ramp to IT skills. Now, many people might say, learners need additional help. Not all learners can learn entirely online. That's why we partner with what we call workforce partners. In the US, one of the biggest institutions who provides hands-on, face-to-face coaching, mentoring, and learning support is Goodwill. We also work with Merit America. We also work with more than 100 community colleges where a student taking the Google IT support certificate can go to a classroom and talk to a teacher who will help them through the IT support online certificate. So face-to-face support is available through nonprofit partners for learners who need that kind of support. Now, once someone finishes the IT support certificate, we've worked with Google to create hiring partnerships with many large companies who are looking to hire people in IT. These include Intel, H&R Block, Walmart, Bank of America, and others. And they will interview graduates of the Google IT support certificate because many companies are looking to hire people who don't have college degrees and don't have a background in the field. So one pathway from the Google IT support certificate is a career pathway to a job, but there's also a pathway to a degree. We've had our partners at University of London and our partners at Northeastern University and our partners at University of North Texas decide to extend academic credit towards a bachelor's degree in computer science for anyone who finishes the Google IT support certificate. And what we see is many students finishing the professional certificate, getting a job in IT, and then beginning an online bachelor's degree where they're already employed in a decent paying job. We launched the Google IT support certificate in January of 2018. We are now live with 3 certificates from IBM for entry-level data science, entry-level cybersecurity analyst, and entry-level data analyst with Python. These are all no college degree, no background in the field for entry-level roles. We just launched a certificate with Facebook for social media marketing for people who want to get into a job in digital marketing. We just launched a professional certificate with Salesforce for people who would like to transition their career into a sales job. We just announced with Google 3 additional entry-level professional certificates, one with data analyst, one for software project management, one with UX design. And then we just announced 2 weeks ago a professional certificate for entry-level jobs into bookkeeping positions with Intuit Bookkeeper Professional Certificate. So industry players are coming in to help educate people. It provides a path to a job. It provides a path to an online degree. And we think it'll be a wonderful on-ramp to economic opportunity. I'll briefly talk about Coursera Labs. This is where students in a browser can do hands-on projects using real-world tools like Photoshop or Salesforce or R or Tableau or Google Sheets or HTML. They can build hands-on projects and they can show to their employer that they know how to use the software tools to do a job. What's neat about Coursera Labs is you don't have to download any software. You don't have to install or configure any software. You don't have to download any data sets. On the right side of your browser, you see the instructor's screen. It could be recorded or live. On the left side is your own private workspace identical to the instructor's, where you can actually build a live project by following along with the instructors. This hands-on learning is a great complement to the more theoretical learning that we often see in universities. We've noticed especially that students in universities love taking these guided projects. I think when they're looking at employability and they're thinking about interviewing for a job, being able to say, I know how to use that tool, is a really wonderful part of the interview prep process. They can say, I know how to use Jupyter Notebooks. I know how to use Python. I know how to program in Visual Code Studio. And what we've seen in the most popular projects you can see here on the screen is that students want to learn how to build websites. They want to learn HTML. They want to learn Python. They want to learn how to do project management. They want to learn databases and SQL as well. So these projects are a wonderful complement to a college degree because it can help them interview for jobs and learn the tools needed to do those jobs. I'll talk a little bit about COVID-19 and then wrap. As many folks know, when the pandemic spread, 1.6 billion students from kindergarten through college saw their schools closed. What we saw was a huge demand in online learning that shifted, especially in March and April. Globally, we've had 61 million enrollments since the pandemic started. This is up almost 500% from last year. And especially we're seeing learners who are new to Coursera come onto online learning. In Spain, we're also seeing dramatic growth. You can see in March and April, when the virus really started impacting Spain, we saw a large surge in online learning, 660,000 course enrollments, up 250% from the same time a year ago. As these campuses closed, our partners, our university partners in Spain and all around the world came together and decided to offer their courses for free to any college or university in the world who needed to provide online instruction and who did not have a catalog of 4,000 online courses like our partners have created. So we launched what we called the Campus Response Initiative. This is Coursera for Campus, free to any college or university in the world. It started on March 12th and it ran through September 30th. In February, there were 30 colleges using Coursera for Campus. Within 7 months, that number went from 30 to 3,700. Institutions all over the world, in the Americas, in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, in India and Asia Pacific, universities and colleges embraced Coursera for Campus. It's all free. They had 2.5 million students in just 7 months. 2.5 million students took 22 million free courses from our university partners who made these courses available at no cost to the world's higher education system. Interestingly, 70% of these students access these courses not only online, but on a mobile device. Mobile is extremely important, especially in emerging economies. What were the students taking? They were taking courses from University of Michigan in programming, over 500,000 course enrollments. They're taking courses in neural networks and deep learning and natural language processing. They're taking courses in writing professional emails. They're taking courses from Macquarie University in Australia on Excel for business. They're learning skills in bioinformatics, digital marketing, algorithms, graphic design, and many other cutting-edge skills for the jobs of tomorrow. I'll finish up here with some challenges for higher education, and then in a few minutes, we will be able to break for some Q&A. When we look around the world, as I mentioned, we have 150 of the top universities in the world. We now have almost 4,000 other universities using Coursera for Campus. Here's what we're seeing. We're seeing a dramatic focus from students and from schools on employability. In a post-COVID world, well, it's not quite yet post-COVID, but in a re-emerging COVID world, individual students are really looking for job-relevant education. They want that college degree that says I was accepted and I've completed a rigorous 4-year program. And they also want skills that will make them job ready. Universities are looking at how to lower the cost of delivering education. Online and delivering online courses for credit has turned out to be a great way for universities to reduce cost. Universities, especially in India and Latin America, are trying to figure out how to serve more students without building more buildings or hiring more professors. And the scale of online learning is very effective in growing the capacity of a university. Interestingly, many universities, when they started with Coursera for Campus, did not start by offering courses for their students. They started by offering courses to their faculty. Most faculty in the world before March had never done online learning. A great way to learn how to teach online is to look at some of the best schools who have done this online learning for the last 8 years. And so we had many faculty development programs being delivered using our Coursera for Campus program. And then finally, many universities want to be on the cutting edge of online hands-on projects, online degrees, and Coursera has been a way to do that. So what we're seeing now in terms of what universities are looking for from Coursera, they're looking for academic integrity to make sure that they can not only assess the knowledge of their students, but make sure that there's no cheating, there's no plagiarism, and that the person who's taking the test really is who they think it should be. And so we've added plagiarism detection, the ability to write private exams that are not on the internet using question banks, and having basic ability for professors to monitor the academic integrity of their assessments. We're making it easier for professors to look at their courses that they're teaching on campus and map it to our partners' courses, which are on Coursera. Many universities want to license content from our partners on Coursera, and they also want to build their own content that they can deliver to their students. So private authoring is another major capability that will allow any university to author courses for free and deliver them to their students online on Coursera for free. We also have just announced at the Zoom Global Conference direct imports from Zoom into Coursera. So any professor who's lecturing on Zoom can click a button, they can start recording to Coursera, and when their lecture is over, it's immediately available on Coursera and it's available on the mobile app. We see a lot of interest from students in student employability and the ability to not only take courses from our partners and build projects on Coursera, but to measure their skills and benchmark a student's skills against someone who has that job from our Coursera for Business customer base. So helping students know what skills do I need and at what level of proficiency to be employable at graduation is a big part of what our colleges and universities are looking for. And then mobile learning, as I mentioned, is important, not only while you're connected, but the ability to download courses and take courses offline when you have intermittent connectivity, and even in some areas of the world, intermittent power, where you actually have to use a battery-based device in order to do your learning. So in summary, COVID-19 has been a great tragedy, but as the Secretary General of the United Nations has said, it is an opportunity with technology, online learning, and remote working to potentially build a more equal world where there's better access not only to learning opportunity, but also to economic opportunity. And with that, I'm happy to take some questions. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Jeff. It's been a very insightful presentation, and Coursera's numbers are just incredible. When you were presenting, it came to my mind something that is repeatedly said at technology conferences. You know, Uber, the largest taxi company in the world, has no cars. Airbnb, the world's largest accommodation provider, owns no real estate. Facebook, the largest media owner, creates no content. So following that analogy would say actually that Coursera is the largest education provider, but has no teachers, no students, no campuses, no content. So my first question is, do you expect to keep this incredible growth after humanity finds a vaccine and the virus hopefully is gone forever? Is this the future, you know, universities and tech companies putting their content in platforms like yours? Do you think online learning will become the standard? And if so, what do you think will be the role of the campuses, and what happens to that social, physical experience of the students?
It's a wonderful line of reasoning, and I think that you are spot on. My sense is that online learning is here to stay. And like you said, Coursera is really just a platform that allows higher education to support the transformation of higher education. It's actually universities from within helping other universities make this move online. And they're really sharing and licensing their courses for other universities that want to use those courses to help educate their students. So we hope that we can continue to be a place where universities collaborate with industry and with other universities to do a more effective job giving access to online learning to more students. I don't think that we'll ever have teachers ourselves. I don't think that we will have our own students. We will certainly not have our own degrees. We will never be a university, but we can enable universities to help other universities go through this transformation. The residential experience. What we are seeing is a reinvention of the way people teach, the way that students learn, and even the way that employees work. There's, I think, an analogy between online learning and online working. And just as we will never go back to the office 5 days a week and work in the same way that we used to work, I don't think that we will ever go back to a world where there's no online learning. But also, just as we're not going to always go back to work in the same way, we're also still going to have offices. We will still go back to the office every now and again, probably not everybody. At Coursera, we're thinking maybe 40% of our jobs will be remote and not in an office at all. But most will still have the ability to come to an office, probably 2 or 3 times a week. Some people might want to come 5 times a week. It depends on their preferences, really. I think the same will be true for education. I think that many students, especially adult learners who are working, who have jobs, who have families, and who cannot afford to stop their lives to go back to campus, will be able to have incredible learning experiences from the best universities. And it'll be more of a lifelong relationship that happens throughout my working career. So instead of only going to campus for 4 years and then being finished with my university, I think universities will create lifelong relationships with students that will happen on campus for many students and exist and extend for the full life of someone's working career and hopefully beyond.
It's interesting because we've seen in your presentation that Coursera has a wide catalog of courses from many universities in different disciplines. I think I saw 1,000 courses in business, 800 in data science, and so forth. So do you think that students navigating your platform will be interested in enrolling courses from, let's say, smaller institutions when they find right beside a very similar course from a bigger university with a better brand or better ranked, especially if, as you have explained, if that short course can be used later to access an elite university campus or a longer program? Should they feel threatened?
I don't think that they should feel threatened necessarily. I would feel if I were a university, I would be concerned if I did not have an ability to deliver online learning. Whether you author your own courses, whether you license courses on Coursera or edX or someplace else, every university needs to have a competency in delivering online learning. They can certainly have residential education programs, and I think many universities will still find that many students come for a residential experience. That will be very important for many students who want to experience that residential education for the 4 years of their life between being a young adult and entering the workforce. But any university that is not building the capacity to teach online and to author courses online, I think is falling behind. How's the competition and the competitive landscape going to settle out? I think what's going to happen is that universities will really have to spend more time thinking about what do we offer that is particularly valuable? What discipline, what experience, what professors, what research, what relationships with other institutions like employers or nonprofits or government agencies, what experience and what knowledge can we give to students that's unique? And I think they're going to focus on those things they're good at, and then they will partner and collaborate to fill in the gaps with other universities who do other things well.
Okay. And in your presentation also you have showed that low-skilled jobs are the ones hit hardest by the virus. Jobs performed by qualified people holding bachelor's degree have been less vulnerable. And in addition to this, low-skilled jobs are the ones with the highest risk of automation that will be done by robots in the future. And despite the data you have showed in the Google IT support certificate, MOOC reports normally show that the average learner is someone that has already has a university degree or a college degree, or at least a significant educational background or professional experience. So do you think MOOC platforms are essentially for lifelong learners? What are the challenges to reach the unskilled? Because if finally online courses don't impact the disadvantaged people with a low educational background, maybe we would have to face critics saying that MOOCs are widening the digital divide, by reskilling the already skilled and not closing the gap.
I think that that's a very valid concern if Coursera did not expand and innovate the kinds of content on the platform and the audiences that we reach. Certainly in the first 5 years of Coursera's life, from 2012 through 2017, it was almost exclusively university content in advanced subjects being learned by people who have bachelor's degrees already, and some have master's degrees and PhDs. But what's happened in the last 3 years or so is we've really, by bringing on some of these industry partners, focusing on building not just content, but credentials, certificates, professional programs with employment opportunities, and then delivering that to workplaces, to government workforce development agencies, and onto campuses as well. We are now reaching populations who don't have college degrees in ways that we were not reaching them 3 years ago. A major part of this is what we called the Workforce Recovery Initiative, where, like we offered Coursera for Campus free to any university, we in April started offering Coursera for Government free to any government to help unemployed people reskill for new jobs. And through the Workforce Recovery Initiative, government workforce development agencies are using these entry-level digital job training programs to reach audiences of people who do not have college degrees and who do not have backgrounds in the field. So I think we started mostly with higher ed for people who have already had degrees from higher education, and now we are expanding the content, the credential, and the audiences that we're reaching.
Partnerships with governments are essentially for the unskilled, would you say that? Okay, interesting. Okay, and out of those 72 million learners, that's a number, is this a number that actually enroll the course, or the number of students that finalize the course? I mean, I know your answer, but I just wanted to have some insight from you on completion rates. Why are they so low, and how is Coursera and its partners working to increase completion rates? Is this a challenge? Does this concern you? And what are the barriers? And essentially, is it possible to improve those figures without surrendering either depth by making courses shorter or more or easier, or accessibility, which means selecting students?
It's a wonderful question. And I think that we in higher education often come to this question with an understandable bias. And the bias is this: in the traditional world of higher education, where a young person would expect to spend 4 years or 3 years if you're in Britain getting a college degree, and sometimes pay considerable amounts of money, and in the United States go into considerable debt in order to buy that education, where you only get the degree if you complete. Completion is very important. If you ask, how many people ask how many YouTube videos were completed, how many Netflix movies are completed, there are many things that don't require a high completion rate. What we see is when students come onto Coursera and start a course for free, about 10% will complete that course. But many of those students did not ever expect to complete the course. When you look at the individual lecture videos, among those who start a lecture, these are 5 to 10 minutes, we find that 96% of students who start a lecture finish the lecture. For free courses, only 10% finish the full course. But when a student pays for the course and they're looking for that credential, the certificate that says, I completed this course, we see that the completion rates are about 50%. When students at work take courses that their employers want them to take, we see the completion rates are about 60%. When they're doing workforce development programs like a COVID contact tracing course from Johns Hopkins University, the completion rate is 90%. And when they're doing an online degree on Coursera, the completion rate is over 90%. So it depends. Why is the student learning? If they're learning to get a credential and they must finish for that, then they're more likely to finish. If they're just learning a lecture or they want to learn a new skill, oftentimes they will not finish. And that's okay, because they didn't pay anything. They didn't lose anything. They spent some time, they learned something new, and they got what they wanted.
But which you think will be the trend that will prevail?
I think it's sort of a try before you buy. If you look at the number of students, we have over 10,000 students taking online degrees from our partners, professors, and universities today. Over 60% of those students in online degree programs, earning degrees online on Coursera, over 60% of them started by trying an open course first. Try before you buy. Let me see if I'm interested in this topic. Let me see if I like this professor. I've never met this university. Let me introduce myself to this university. Without paying anything, I can try it. I can see if this is something that's interesting, if I'm good at it. And then if I like it and I feel that this is something I want to pursue, I can continue to do that. But I do think that the future is, like with many things, trying before you buy, letting people sample things, explore before they make a big time and investment, a financial investment. I think that's going to work. And most people studying on degrees online will have started in some shorter open course online.
Nice. So let's now talk about stackability, which is a trend that interested me a lot, and I think the audience will appreciate your comments on it. For those not familiar with the word, it means, as Jeff has showed in his slides, cutting long programs into shorter modules, which gives students credentials and then allowing them to accumulate or stack them together at their own pace. How do you see this trend? Because it seems to me it can be a huge source of innovation. Do you see it that way?
It is. You know, once you take something that was once monolithic and you can break it into modular pieces and you can recombine those pieces, even across institutions, even across schools and colleges, even across industries, suddenly the number of combinations and possibilities really opens up. So I would encourage those in higher education to think about stackability in a few ways. For sure, building a degree online, and at the time that you design that online degree, thinking about what will be the modules that people can take as discrete parts of the learning process that can then stack into this full degree, that makes good sense. Building a stackable degree from the outset makes good sense. Another thing that we're seeing, and University of Michigan is doing a wonderful job here, they have multiple degrees on Coursera, and each of these degrees is stackable in the degree, but now they're starting to mix and match pieces across degrees. So they have a Master's of Public Health, they have a Master's of Applied Data Science, they just announced a Master's of Population Science, and they're starting to mix the different pieces, all from Michigan and all part of online degree programs, but now they're starting to mix pieces of their degree programs for interdisciplinary stackability, still within the institution of University of Michigan and still only within online degrees, but across colleges at University of Michigan. We also have industry to higher education stackability. That's something that the two parties did not agree on ahead of time, but University of London looked at the Google IT cert and says, we can articulate credit to that Google IT certificate. So you can have stackability across institutions that was not predetermined. And then another thing that I think is really exciting with universities is many universities, in a sense, are allowing their students to take courses from universities on Coursera and have that count as credit towards an on-campus college degree. That's almost a sort of stackability as well. Taking an online course from a Duke and having it count towards a degree at NMIMS University in India is a way of multi-higher educational institution stackability.
So you expect actually students, let's say, mixing programs and certificates or modules, you know, from one university with another and with industry, tech companies like you cited, and also offline and online? Is this going to be actually the you know, what the future is about?
Absolutely. We now have almost 4,000 colleges and universities around the world using our partners' courses as part of their on-campus program, which has now been moved online. Well more than half, I want to say about 75% of those universities, especially in India and Latin America, are actually offering credit towards their degree for students who finish courses on Coursera. It's not up to the student whether it's stackable, it's up to the institution whether it's stackable. Since the institution determines what counts as stackable credit towards the degree that we confer to our students, they will decide what they award credit for or not. So I think the idea that students will actually piece together different modules for credit, that's probably not going to happen. The higher education institutions still will own the integrity of their credential, of their degree. They will determine for what type of learning and credentials they will articulate credit, and the institution will be the ones who design and control stackability.
Yeah, this is very interesting. Now let me change. You have, I'm not going to ask you what is the valuation of Coursera, but you have way past unicorn valuation. What is the core competence of Coursera today? I'm sure it's not the same as 10 years ago, but regarding technology, I would like to know, what are the most important challenges for you right now? Is it data analytics, or learning analytics? Is it technologies for student authentication? Maybe incorporating technologies like gaming, virtual reality, augmented reality, more collaborative tools in regards of the retention and engagement of students. What are your tech challenges of a platform like yours?
Well, there's what are our challenges and core competencies, and then also what are the technology challenges and core competencies. Let me start with the broader question of what does Coursera need to do well in order for us to continue to serve students and our partners. It really is a continuation of what started with Andrew and Daphne. They were both computer scientists at Stanford when they launched Coursera in 2012. The core competence was really two things. One is being very good instructors who can create online instruction that students around the world wanted. And the second was building an online learning experience so that students who took those courses can master the knowledge and the skills needed to complete the courses. And to a large degree, that's still what this is about. We need to continue to provide better tools for our partners to author high quality content that's available on the platform. We need to continue to expand the ways that students can learn. And a lot of that is mobile, a lot of that's offline. We've been making a lot of investments in Coursera Labs. We believe that hands-on learning, the application of that knowledge that universities are so good at teaching, to be applied using job-relevant tools, software tools with data sets, especially in a world of digital transformation and cloud computing. Applying skills with real-world tools is very important. We're spending an awful lot of time and money building Coursera Labs, both for students in university as well as working professionals. And then a third thing that we are really focused on, it's kind of basic, but we're trying to really extend the reach for our partners. Our university partners want to reach students all around the world. They want to reach learners in the workplace as well. So growing our reach, helping our partners take their professors, their content and their credentials and reach every corner of the world is a major part of what we're focused on as well.
You have said in your presentation also that COVID has accelerated change in universities. You have explained it very beautifully with all the icons. And one of those challenges, if not most, is student employability. That means delivering job-relevant skills to improve employability. I honestly think IE University is very good at that. We are very close to market and employers. We're quite fast in design and structuring courses with relevant hard and soft skills. But generally speaking, in the world or maybe in the US, you know that system very well. Why do you think universities are not filling that skills gap? You have named a few digital, let's say, profiles, marketing, digital marketing, blockchain, coding, graphic design. Do you think the transition to online learning or the digitization will actually spur universities to improve their courses, alignment to the labor market? Or because you see all these tech skills, it's always tech companies that I mean, do they have to be the only providers, or is it because they're, you know, the fast changing market environment, you know, gives them an advantage in that sense?
I think that the fast-changing environment is the root cause of why it's so hard to keep up with employers' needs. Depending on where you go in the world, some employers will say that the college graduates of certain universities are sort of well-trained for their jobs. Others will say, not as well-trained. I believe, and so I went to college and I was an English major and I double majored in English and quantitative economics. I loved the liberal arts. I love humanities. I also know that learning how to use computers and program computers and learning statistics is also very important. My sense is that what universities are very, very good at, distinctively good at, is pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, being pioneers in research, knowledge, theory, concepts, frameworks. These things are durable. These things are transferable. In a world that's rapidly changing, knowing how a certain system works can very well be the key to solving a problem in a different domain. And so I personally think it's really important that universities continue to be on the cutting edge of research and focused more on knowledge. I think what's beautiful about where we're heading is that through collaboration, universities can continue to do what they do well, which is that deep, durable knowledge that's not specific to one technology tool or another technology tool. Let industry do the tools training. Let universities break new ground in the frontiers of knowledge. And then what you have, I think, is a wonderful partnership where universities are teaching and breaking new ground in knowledge, and the companies are helping students apply that knowledge to specific tools with specific business contexts and specific data sets. To me, that's the beauty of courses from universities and projects from industry. I mean, for me, it seems very simple, but we see many of the universities saying, we're going to continue to teach those theoretical courses, and we're going to use a lot of these projects from Coursera's industry partners just to make sure that our students have those skill tools. We're not going to have to teach them, though. We can get that on Coursera.
But okay, seeing how Coursera has evolved and all these partnerships and a wide range of courses, would you define yourself today as a MOOC platform? And if so, what is for you, Jeff, at MOOC today? Because it seems to be that every single letter is negotiable. Massive. What does massive mean today? Open is free. Open is a free entrance, a free cost. Online, course. What is for you a MOOC? And do you think Coursera today, where you are today with 72 million learners, all of you have achieved, is it a MOOC platform?
We think of Coursera as a global learning platform. I mean, certainly the idea that you can come to Coursera and in massive numbers with millions of people. One of the courses from Yale that was published last year is called The Science of Wellbeing by Dr. Laurie Santos, and it's all about how humans make choices, and certain choices make us happy and other ones make us less happy. We've had over 3 million enrollments in that one course in 2020 alone. Now, that's massive. And the vast majority of people did not pay for it. That's open, and it is a course. So there definitely are, it is fair to say, are there MOOCs on Coursera? Absolutely. And is that model of big, open, accessible, and free, is that important? Absolutely. But Coursera has grown into much more than just a MOOC platform, because now some of these MOOCs are earning students credits towards college degrees in countries that are halfway around the world from the professor that authored that MOOC. And many of these MOOCs are actually being authored by industry. And many of these MOOCs aren't even MOOCs. They're online degree programs with live lectures with professors and study sets and TAs, and when you graduate, you get a real diploma. And with the hands-on projects, that's not a MOOC at all. You're building a project using a tool and data set, that's on Coursera too. So I do think that MOOCs are still very important. They're an important part of Coursera, but it's one piece of a growing learning ecosystem.
It's time. I have to finish. Thank you very much on behalf of all Enlighted partners, Fundación Telefónica, IE University, the South Summit, Fundación Santillana. I would like you to end with a message to the people, suffering this great lockdown, studying online, students seeing their education disrupted, people working at home. Give them a message, and thank you very much, Jeff, for your time.
Thank you. I want to thank you and IE University. My message to most is the future is about learning, and learning is opportunity. Learning has been the source of human progress since we started farming. The way that we can learn and share ideas has allowed us to transcend what every other species has done. And I think that the bright side of this pandemic is that we may see a future where not only can anyone learn online, anyone can get job opportunities online as well. So the ability to learn and the ability to have equal access to economic opportunity might be one of the most promising outcomes of this horrible pandemic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's been great to know more about online learning and its many possibilities. I think that your contributions have solved some of our doubts. Classrooms are definitely changing. Blackboards and chalk are but a memory. We are facing an era where digital transformation is not the only revolution. EdTech is a turning point that can change everything. But what is the purpose of educational technology? Our next speakers have major roles in some of the most relevant EdTech companies. There is no higher authority here to talk about this topic. To moderate this debate, we have Miguel Arias here with us. He is the Director of Telefónica Global Entrepreneurship. Welcome, Miguel.
Hi, Marta. It's great to be here. And we're going to be discussing today about the fact if EdTech has reached a tipping point in this 2020 or not. And we have an amazing panel to discuss this. So I'm going to just introduce each of them briefly. First of all, I would like to welcome Matthew Greenfield. He's the managing partner of Rethink Education. Hi, how are you doing?
Fine, how are you?
I'm great. From Brazil, representing the NGO sector, we have got Dennis Misne. I hope I said this right. Dennis, he's the co-founder of, and CEO, of Lehman Foundation. Hi, Dennis.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. And representing a bit the corporate and investor world at once, from the UK, we've got Charles McIntyre, co-founder of edtech. Hello, Charles.
Hi, nice to see you, and it's a real pleasure to be with you here today.
Wonderful. And to start with, I think we can all agree that edtech has received tremendous amount of funding over the last years, so many rounds, more than $10 billion raised lately. We can see that edtech is becoming mainstream. Everybody's talking about this. And we have also seen this tremendous change in behavioral patterns through the pandemic, right? I mean, we have seen so much more usage of online tools over the last years. I think it was Lenin that said that there are decades where nothing happens and weeks where decades happened. And we saw this happening over the last months. So my first question would be, I think, first for you, Charles, this is for Matthew. I mean, what do you think are the biggest changes that you saw over the last months?
So when my firm started back in 2012, the dominant assumption of most venture capitalists was that we were going to use robots to replace human teachers, and that students would sit in front of screens and learn things by watching videos and responding to quizzes. And now we've had a massive experiment with, conservatively, at least 2 billion people participating in human conversation, the component of education that Charles described earlier, that involves people talking to each other and human empathy and human habits and values. And in a strange way, that has caught much of the edtech industry flat-footed because so many people had bet on the robot hypothesis. So the online program managers, for example, the industry that helps universities to go online and build successful online programs, build largely asynchronous programs where students work in isolation and did not see each other's faces and hear each other's voices for the most part. There are actually only 2 online program managers that started from the very beginning with video conferences and seminar-style education. Both of them were started by one man, Von Katzman, and I happen to have been lucky enough to invest in both. I happen also not to have invested in Coursera and Udacity, which have done pretty well with the robot hypothesis, but I think people are questioning that hypothesis now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've seen all this tremendous change. But I think the question is, will this change last after the pandemic is over, or will everybody rush back to the proper habits they had before? I mean, will we rush back to the physical school? So what do you think, Dennis? Is this lasting, or is this going to just be a fate?
I think there are some things that change that will last. One is what I call the psychological barriers for teachers to adopt technology. So some of these psychological barriers was this old idea, maybe with a mindset of the 80s or 90s, that technology was such a hard thing to use, that teachers would be, the students would outsmart teachers in the use of technology. And I think what we're seeing in the pandemic is that using Zoom, using other kinds of video conferencing tools, using WhatsApp to mobilize your students is not that hard, right? And actually teachers use that on their regular basis. You're able to use Google Drive or any other kind of collaboration software. So I think that psychological barrier has been removed. And we see this in data in Brazil. Over 79% of teachers in a survey that was recently conducted say they're comfortable about using technology now. And this used to be around 40% before the pandemic. So this is a major behavioral change from someone who really determines the use of technology. What won't keep happening, I think, after the pandemic is this idea of online classes, very passive methods of learning. I think when it's too passive, it's really disengaging. And we're seeing that after 2 or 3 months of online learning at massive scale around the world, students are getting disengaged, they are not participating anymore, they want to drop out. We're seeing this very clearly. So what makes the difference is if we can combine the openness to technology, bring this to be a more interactive, encourage active learning, encourage student personalization of learning, I think if we can do this, it will be transformation.
Wonderful. And you mentioned, Dennis, all these teachers adapting to all these new tools. And there are so many tools. There's an app almost for everything right now. So an app for content management, an app for tests, another tool for grading. What do you think? I mean, Charles, do you think we will see this further tremendous unbundling in many different tools, or we're going to see the opposite of the next years?
So I think these things go in stages. First of all, there is an unbundling, which we see as people develop and invent new tools to improve the efficacy of learning. But what happens after that is that these things start to aggregate. And you start to see that already. You see businesses in the States like Chegg, which started off with content and now adds a whole range of other tools, kind of online tutoring to kind of materials to test and prep. And so what we'll see, as we do in many other industries, is that once you have that initial fragmentation, it starts to reconsolidate and you get some key drivers in the industry, bundle that whole combination. And what we need to remember is at the heart of it, what is a school? What is a university? It's essentially a bundled offering. So that bundled offering is the model that we're used to, and that's where it'll end up. So I think we're just in a stage of unbundling, but it will return back in a different form as a bundled combination.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And let me be a bit controversial here. I mean, I have this feeling that in edtech, a lot of the elements of edtech is becoming a commodity, from the business model to a technology. So, and I would like to ask this for each of you. I mean, my feeling is just maybe brand and content is going to be a differentiator. Do you think everything's becoming a commodity? And if not, what are the differentiators for all of you? Maybe, I don't know, maybe Charles, you can, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I think the key bit about education technology is, can we deliver at scale a bespoke service? And that is at the heart of the promised land for education technology. If we can deliver that bespoke element, the personalized service which addresses each individual's need but at scale, then we've delivered what we can with education technology. And that then is no longer a commodity. It is a very discrete, useful tool. If we just focus on a extensive doom boom type offering where everybody has the same and it's mass distribution just of content of one flavor, it's failed.
I see you nodding, Dennis. What do you think? And then we're going to give it to Matthew. So.
I think Charles' points make a lot of sense. I think a big part of scaling up, at least in developing countries where I come from, is just this massive physical barrier, which is connectivity, right? Schools are not connected. In Brazil, 20% of students don't have access to the internet properly. 42% don't have a combination of great devices and great internet connection. So this is a major barrier, right? So a lot of the changes are not either going to make the world even more equal, which certainly we don't want to, or we need to tackle that. So I think there is one thing that might be a commodity and might be less sexy than talking about the tools and the features, but that we definitely need to talk about as the education community, which is making sure that connectivity to schools and to students is a priority over the next couple of years. Otherwise, we'll just leave many, many people behind.
Absolutely. Very, very relevant point, Dennis. And Matthew, what do you think?
Your question is really a question about education content, and building an actual school or an automated tool that really teaches someone a difficult skill is not so easy. So interactive tools are not as easy to build as mediocre education videos in which a teacher stands in front of a chalkboard and explains things, the MOOC model.
Yeah, totally. You're right. Let me try to go then a bit more in specifics. I mean, we see a lot about this talk about blended models, right? And we see that with this now remote first world, it looks like it's much more blurry line between our digital and physical selves. So maybe this is for you, Dennis. Do you think this line is going to get even blurrier? And you talk about how the community needs to be a part of all these interactions. So what is your feeling around blended educational models?
I think blended education is a fantastic opportunity if we do it right. So I'm trying to use an analogy in some debates, which is you have to separate what is an online classroom and an online lesson, right? And the online classroom is an environment where people are actually working together. And if you blend that and you bring the physical classroom, the debate, kind of a lot of the old talk about the flipped classroom, take it to the next level, right? You can do some things but you need to have a much more interactive experience. You have to gather the sense of cooperation, develop social learning at school when people are together, and teachers can be very provocative and can take the students to a next level experience. If you think about the hybrid model where it's all about passive learning, or it's all about just extending the school day with the same kind of traditional way of delivering content that's not referring to the teacher teaching in a class, like just lecturing, I think this is going to work. So I think we need to take this opportunity and not only include technology to do the things that we already do, but use technology to open new forms of learning for schools.
Totally, totally. And now switching a bit gears and talking more about the corporates, this is for Matthew. I mean, as you know, here in Telefonica, we have a strong bet on edtech and education as a whole from the Telefonica Foundation. We do to, as you mentioned before, support communities. Also, our more corporate approach in Educación Digital, where we try to sell also products to other corporates. What do you think in this new world that we're mentioning and discussing today is the role of the corporate, or particularly of the telco, and both as an operator, as a creator of content and platforms, and also as a customer? What do you feel?
So if we're going to reach the bottom billion, it has to be through cell phone carriers. There's no other way. And we need business models that are probably supported by philanthropy or by advertising. We need, in particular, some sort of delightful and addictive game that teaches people to read without a teacher being involved.
I don't know if teachers will love that, but yeah.
Well, no, there will still be a lot for teachers to do. Right now, so Charles alluded earlier to the idea of technology that can emulate a human tutor. And right now we're very far from that. But the thing about exponential technology growth is that once you reach the knee of the curve, it moves very quickly. So I remember when computer translation was just a joke, horrifically inaccurate. There was a famous example of translation from English into Russian and then back of a quote from the Bible. And the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, was translated into Russian, and then it came back as the wine is good, but the meat is rotten, which is maybe an amusing insight into the materiality of Russian mindset. But now computer translation is roughly as good as human translation.
Indeed.
So that is not to say that there will be no role for human teachers when we hit this inflection point, but rather that the role of human teachers will change. I mean, right now, teachers spend a lot of time doing direct instruction, standing up in front of a chalkboard or whiteboard and talking and trying to keep the attention of an entire group. I'm a former college professor. I have a PhD in English from Yale. I taught at Bowdoin College and Columbia University and the City University of New York, and it's exhausting, right? It's much better for the teacher to be working one-on-one as a mentor. And by the way, I don't know about the ratios in Spain, but in the US, there is one guidance counselor in K-12 schools for every 500 students. So there is no way for that guidance counselor to be giving people advice about their life plan, about how the academic work might connect to a career, especially not discovering a career that is connected to one's passions. So that's something that the teacher needs to be doing ultimately. There's no way to have an administrator do it. So the role of the teacher will change.
Absolutely. I mean, I see that you foresee a better life for teachers in the future. I was sitting in some classes with my girls, which are in primary school during the pandemic, and it was totally insane. All these 20 kids just moving around, impossible to grab the attention. So, I mean, teachers and online teachers are real heroes. So I hope that you are certainly right. And actually before, I mean, Charles, we discussed a bit about the bundling and unbundling. And I have this feeling that when ecosystems mature, and edtech is certainly maturing, then we need to see how each of these pieces orbit around each other. And there are a few of the planets which are bigger, right? Like the bigger platforms, like the Coursera's of the world, and the rest of the Zooms maybe in the future. And the rest of the tools need to be connecting or interconnecting with each other. What is your feeling around this interdependency and interconnection between tools and platforms?
So I think that the starting point to remember is that we're still at a very early stage in the development of kind of education technology. And if we look at other industries like the media industry, you know, they are already 30–40% digitized, and the education market is probably about 4% digitized. So we're still, when we talk about maturing, we're talking still at the very early steps of that. Though COVID has accelerated that position, I think there is still a long way. I think the other key bit in terms of how this all fits together is that there is a big, difficult conversation around the impact of investment and money, and how does investment play? Because what the sad truth is that schools and universities are short on funding. And what happens, how this changes, is that what it connects all these is the funding is what drives this. So as we emerge from edtech, what we're seeing is the establishment of growing independent businesses join this together by being able to provide the funding and development capital to that agenda. It then is served back into consumer students and with the help of universities and schools. So why we have, for example, CU, which provides online courses to higher education, is because they can access the capital to fund the development of that program, which the university can't do itself. So what interconnects in terms of answering the question, ultimately money sits behind it, and capital markets and investors move quicker than government and universities. That's what's going to drive the next stage of growth in education technology.
Wonderful. And we are nearing the end to this very insightful debate. And we have all tried to have this crystal ball on the future and talk about things that may happen, future trends. But famously, Jeff Bezos tries to say that he always bets in things that will not change in the next 10 years, right? Because that's the most sure bet you can make. So I would love to ask each of you, and maybe we can start with Dennis, what do you think will not change in edtech over the next 10 years?
I think what won't change is the need to offer more personalized learning for students. We have hundreds of millions of students. It's impossible to believe that the model that we currently have, that treats them all equal, that assumes they all learn at the same age, at the same pace, is going to change dramatically. It's not going to change, so we need to use technology to fix that. The other thing it's not going to change is that it's really, really hard to teach well at scale. And technology is good at helping doing things at scale. So I think we should look at that because it's going to be hard. The last thing is that we need to think is these sectors are largely going to be driven by government, especially in K through 12. So if we don't solve the way how government is getting engaged with edtech, we're not going to solve the problem.
Totally. Matthew, what do you think?
Just to build on Dennis's point, sadly, I think the thing that is not going to change is that there is going to be a massive opportunity gap between the privileged around the globe and the vulnerable. And that what we've seen during the pandemic is that, A, most edtech doesn't work. It's simply not educationally sound. B, even when it does work, it often widens rather than narrows the gap because the poor don't have good access to bandwidth, to their own devices, to private space and freedom from chores. They just don't get to participate in the educational system in the way that the affluent do, even if they're in the same public school system. So that, unfortunately, I don't think is going to change.
And lastly, for you, Charles?
So trying to bring some hope to the conversation. I think one of the things that I think is important and won't change is the role and importance of the teacher. And I think a lot of people have always assumed that technology is about replacement. It's not in this case. It's about enhancement. And what I think we really need to do is to remember that, and in the context of how we encourage and enhance the teacher's ability and capability in the sector. And I often ask myself, who is teaching the teachers? That, I think, is the important bit to go into the next generation of education development for technology.
So we are nearing the end of the debate, and it's been super interesting for me. And remember, we started with one question, right? Has edtech reached a tipping point or not this year? So we'd love to go the other way around to each of you, and you answer to me in one sentence. Charles, has edtech reached a tipping point in 2020?
Absolutely.
Matthew?
In terms of the belief that education can happen online, yes. It used to be considered a fringe or inadequate substitute, and now people understand that it's the optimal solution in the majority of cases.
And Dennis?
I think we're in the beginning of the tipping point, and it's good to be here.
So, we're going to have this other edition of Enlightened in 2030, in 10 years' time. So I hope that we are also invited to do a panel by then. And then we can see if we were right. We're going to just review this session that has been recorded, and we're going to see if we were right about what changed and what have not changed. But I would really like to heartfully thank you for the time we had together. I hope it was interesting for the audience. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for including us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing such valuable information. It has been fascinating. Y ahora, cuando son las 5:15 de la tarde, ha llegado el momento que todos estábamos esperando, el momento de premiar a las mejores startups del mundo en materia de educación, tecnología e innovación. La verdad es que es un momento emocionante, y más en un año como este. Y creo que nadie mejor para expresar esa emoción, porque ella también está emocionada, que María Benjumea, fundadora y CEO de Spain Startup. María, por favor.
Muchas gracias, Marta.
A ti.
Imposible mejor momento, imposible más emocionante y sobre todo después de haber estado viviendo juntos estos 5 días apasionantes de Enlighted. Porque han sido 5 días llenas de reflexiones, llenas de formas en las cuales podemos ir abordando conversaciones, debates sobre cómo abordar la educación en estos días tan complejos y además tan rápidos en cómo evoluciona todo el mundo y cómo la innovación y cómo nos tenemos que adaptar a los tiempos es fundamental. Bueno, tengo que decirte, Marta, que es que este ejemplo de Enlighted es claramente esa puesta en escena de esa adaptación permanente. Pero como nosotros somos el socio South Summit, el socio que realmente lo que conectamos es a todas las startups porque es la pura innovación tan necesaria para toda la transformación de la sociedad y sobre todo para conectar lo que son los actores tradicionales, las empresas, con la savia que es la innovación que viene de las startups y la gasolina de los inversores. Creemos que en este sector, que es el sector de la educación, lo que hay es un montón de oportunidades. Justo hoy es el Día de las Startups y justo hoy hemos tenido el gran privilegio de escuchar a 12 startups absolutamente increíbles. 12 startups que han sido producto de una selección súper depurada de más de 450 que se han presentado a nuestra competición, a la competición de Enlighted, procedentes de más de 55 países, solamente un 25 por ahí de ellas de España. Realmente la calidad de estas startups ha sido increíble, pero yo no quiero decir más. Quiero que pongamos un vídeo y que podamos verlas en vivo y en directo. Ahí está.
Meet Buddy AI.
Hello, Ivan.
edtech, an affordable and scalable online testing platform designed for institutions. We are democratizing the creation of interactive content because now it's simple and affordable for everyone.
We are a digital English learning startup.
Omaguru makes the text clear, understandable.
Kimball is a digital marketplace for teachers.
Building AI tutors and personalized learning to democratize education for everyone.
We are the knowledge operating system.
Polyglota, the social method for language learning.
What makes us unique is the combination of 360-degree education.
Tommy is a platform and a device that helps K-12 teachers in emerging countries to create awesome classes.
Cypher inspires children to learn the language of the future through creatively themed coding courses.
Las acabamos de ver en el vídeo, seguro que las habéis visto también en la competición, pero es que ahora tenemos la suerte de veros en vivo y en directo. Aquí estáis las ganadoras, pero ya no querréis oírme a mí más. Con lo cual, lo que estamos es en el momento más emocionante para de verdad saber quiénes son las ganadoras. Lo bueno es que tenemos 5 categorías extraordinarias. Marta, todo tuyo.
Muchísimas gracias, María, por esa pasión y por esa energía. Bueno, el primer premio de la tarde tiene un valor inmenso, no solo por ser una categoría nueva, sino porque además el proyecto ganador es una de las ideas más innovadoras que hemos conocido en esta edición. Para nombrar al ganador en la categoría de mejor solución de formación en tiempos de COVID-19, tiene la palabra Carmen Morenés, directora general de Fundación Telefónica. Carmen, aquí va el ganador.
Muchas gracias, Marta. Realmente momento emocionante abrir este sobre del premio Fundación Telefónica a la mejor startup con la mejor solución durante el COVID. Y el ganador es, the winner is Corbit. Congratulations to Julian Vlad. It's incredible, your solution from Canadian. It's congratulations from all the people that we are behind Enlighted. Y tenemos un vídeo para ver la solución.
Orbit. We are an AI edtech company building AI tutors and personalized learning to democratize education for everyone. With over 10,000 students and professionals enrolled, Corbit's AI tutors have demonstrated considerable gains in learning outcomes and student motivation. That's why at Corbit, we are working hard to transform online corporate training and make it more personalized, more effective, and more engaging for every employee.
Qué emoción, la verdad. Bueno, vamos a ver ahora, a conocer al ganador de la categoría Startup más escalable. Pero antes de entregar el premio, quiero recalcar, porque esto es muy importante, que todos los finalistas tienen un futuro más que prometedor por delante. Vuestro trabajo no solo aporta soluciones a la sociedad, sino que también nos inspira a muchos, bueno, nos inspira a todos. Quiero ceder la palabra a Andrés Saborido, Manager Global de Wayra. Y no solo te cedo la palabra, sino que te doy el sobre con el ganador.
Y el premio de Wayra para la startup más escalable es para Genially. Felicitaciones, Alberto, por todo lo que están haciendo, por esos 7 millones de usuarios, más de 20% de crecimiento mes a mes. Y si para un inversor es importante la escalabilidad en el ámbito de la educación, mucho más, porque significa que están llegando a más estudiantes, a más profesores. Felicitaciones. Un vídeo, por favor.
Now with Genially, we like to say that we are democratizing the creation of interactive content because now it's simple and affordable for everyone. We have concentrated the power of office software and web technology to create a one-for-all tool by which you can create almost everything you learn once and you can use it in many situations. Genially is probably the most versatile tool in the market.
Pues enhorabuena de corazón. Los proyectos finalistas de la siguiente categoría son también impresionantes. La verdad es que la originalidad y la innovación de los candidatos a mejor startup en educación superior se lo han puesto muy pero que muy difícil al jurado. Pero ya tenemos un ganador, así que le cedo la palabra a Geoffroy Gerard, director general de AI Foundation. Geoffroy,
muchas gracias. Y el ganador de University a la startup de educación superior es EduSync. Congratulations, Sean and all the team. Really great to see you guys winning, and dentro video.
EduSync, an affordable and scalable online testing platform designed for institutions. The combined usage of all of these tools in one dedicated place is really what makes us different. From the 100% online testing of 40 different question types to report generation, allowing universities to use their own staff, and doing it all affordably and at scale to allow any organization from around the world to use the system is what makes us truly unique.
5:23 de la tarde, no me negarán que está siendo una tarde de emociones muy fuertes y aún nos quedan 2 categorías por premiar. Es turno ahora de descubrir al ganador de la categoría Startup con mayor impacto social en educación. Y tiene la palabra Miguel Barrero, director de Fundación Santillana. Miguel.
Hola Marta, gracias. Muy bien, pues el premio de la Fundación Santillana, la startup con mayor impacto social en educación, va para Tommy. Enhorabuena, Juan Lopera. Enhorabuena, Colombia. Y damos paso al vídeo que nos enseñe Tommy.
Tommy is a platform and a device that helps K-12 teachers in emerging countries to create awesome classes. It's an online subscription for those offline classrooms which work like Kahoot or Quizlet, with more than 40,000 games already created by the community of teachers that we have in the last 5 months, and very easy to use templates to create new ones, details report, and an AI-based advising system to teachers. All this even without internet access inside a classroom.
Qué maravilla tener estos participantes tan brillantes. Ya solo nos queda por descubrir al vencedor en la categoría de Startup con mejor solución tecnológica para el aprendizaje y formación. ¿Estáis listos para saber quién es el último ganador de esta edición de los Enlighted Awards? Pues tiene la palabra de nuevo María Benjumea, CEO y fundadora de Spain Startup. Te dije, María, que no te fueras muy lejos porque tenía este sobrecito.
Nada me gusta más que esto. Ta-ta-ta-chan, because this is the last one. Who is going to be the super winner? ¿Quién va a ser el super ganador? Pues el super ganador es, the super winner is Buddy A. Ivan, congratulations, because you not only are the super winner for this, you are the super winner in South Summit in this category of education. So congrats. You are Next year, we will see you there at South Summit and at Enlighted talking, because you will have an incredible company and incredible startups. Congrats.
Thanks. Yeah, it's an honor. Yeah, I'm shocked, actually.
We are going to see your video.
So enter Body AI. We help children practice spoken English by talking with a virtual AI-powered character, just as they would with a human tutor. We help children learn speaking vocabulary, improve pronunciation, and even practice real-life dialogues. So join us on a mission, and I hope our children would be able to really speak to each other.
¡Wow! ¡Qué emoción! La verdad, muchísimas gracias a todos los participantes, pero a todos, tanto a los finalistas como a los que han entregado los premios, que han estado aquí con nosotros. Muchas gracias. El trabajo de todos vosotros, de todos los que estáis emprendiendo, inventando con las startups, está cambiando el mundo. Hemos vivido un momento muy emocionante, pero Enlighted 2020 no termina aquí. A continuación tenemos por delante un encuentro interesantísimo. Seguro que muchos de vosotros habéis seguido de cerca el trabajo de Tomás Puello. Pues hoy nos va a contar cosas que de nuevo nos van a sorprender. Our next contributor recently became a worldwide sensation. One day you wake up, you write an article on the internet, and you find out it has been shared by millions. This is the story of our next speaker, a Silicon Valley engineer who became a global reference after posting several articles on coronavirus. The Hammer and the Dance is one of the most well-known. What had started as a Facebook post turned out into useful information for governments across the globe. I'm talking about Tomás Puello, the growth vice president at Cruise Hero. He knows what French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre meant when he said that words are loaded pistols. Tomás Puello's words became a hammer and a dance. Please welcome Tomás Puello.
Thank you for having me.
So what are you going to tell us today?
Well, let's talk about the future of work and education. And obviously with the coronavirus, there's a question of how much of these changes will last, how much are we going to be using remote in the future for work and for education, how much is going to replace the current use. And I think the way we think about it is, up till now there was a little bit of remote work. Around 5% of employees, knowledge workers, were using remote work. And then obviously with the coronavirus, that explodes when it goes up. As lockdowns start releasing, that goes down. But we should imagine what that would have been without the coronavirus, right? And it would probably have shown an S-curve. The penetration of remote work would have been slow at the beginning and then starts ramping up and then slow down again. And it's an S-curve because that's how many things in the world work. That's the way an epidemic works. First it's very, very slow, then it expands to everybody, and then it starts saturating the population and slows down again. Is the way memes work. First they're retweeted, for example, in a tweet by a few people, then everybody talks about it, and then it starts slowing down once most people have already talked about it. It is the way nations change. There was a lot of change in the First World War, and then nothing in the 40s, then suddenly in the Second World War, a lot of changes, and then nothing happened again until the 90s, where suddenly there's again a big change. These things don't happen little by little, they happen in S-curves, as we can see right now. It's the same for getting a job. You study for a long time, you start looking for something, and then you start interviewing, and very quickly, boom, you get the job. It's the same thing for a promotion. You work for a very long time for it until you get it, and then you don't have one for a long time. It is the way achievement work. It is the way that companies go up or down. It is the way that even popcorn explodes. First there's nothing, it's hitting, and then suddenly, boom, it explodes, and then it stops again. It is the way muscles work. It is the way animation work. Slow, fast, slow. It is the way death works and life. It is the way companies grow. First, there's nothing. They're looking for product market fit, and they find product market fit, then they have a hypergrowth phase, then they reach saturation and stagnation. And it's the way technology adoption works. First, you have early adopters who use it, and then everybody starts using it once it crosses the chasm, and then it starts slowing down again when everybody that is meant to use it is using it. And so the question is, for the coronavirus, this has changed the S-curve that we would have found otherwise. But what is the next S-curve going to be like? Is it going to be the way it would have been, or is it going to be accelerated and going higher up? And the two key questions are, where is this invisible asymptote? Where is it going to start slowing down? And how fast are we going to get there? Why are these the key questions? Because if adoption is really, really high, a lot of our life is going to change. For example, this is Automatic. It's the company behind WordPress, and they have around, I think, 1,200 employees all around the world. So it's already doable. And a lot of companies in Silicon Valley have decided already that they want to go and be remote first, or allow a lot of remote work. You can see that more than 60% of employees in companies like Quora or other tech companies in the US, and especially in Silicon Valley, already think that they prefer remote work. Not only employees do want to do that, but also companies. For example, Facebook, the median wage is around $250,000. So half of employees in Facebook make more than $250,000. So they have a huge incentive to go outside of Silicon Valley to employ people. So here's what's going to happen. If a lot of people end up working remote very quickly, you're going to have employees leaving to cheaper areas, because that way they can save more money. But also big companies are going to do the same. They're going to start looking for employees that are much cheaper in other areas. Because if you have a $300,000 product manager in Silicon Valley, but instead of that you can have a $50,000 product manager in Ukraine, and it's only 10, 20% worse, the benefit is huge. And so what's going to happen is white-collar workers are going to suffer because of globalization the way blue-collar workers have suffered over the last few decades. So you can see that with globalization and the offshoring of blue-collar work, countries like China, Vietnam have a massive amount of wealth growth, and so their employees have also become much richer. You also have the global elite who has been richer in the last few decades. But the middle classes in these countries have actually not seen their money grow. And probably the same thing is going to happen with remote work now. If your job, like a marketing manager or a product manager or a designer, can be done by a Ukrainian, by an Indian for much cheaper, it will. So we need to be prepared for that. These are the types of massive changes that can happen. And the question becomes, how much then is that going to happen? Well, let's take the office. For that to happen, you need the office to be replaceable. And to understand if it's replaceable, you need to know what it does. And what we think of the office is obviously a place for solo work, it is a place for meeting rooms, but it's substantially more than that. It is also knowing who is accessible right now and having immediate access to that person. It is to monitor productivity, because you can see broadly who is sitting, who is not, who is working, who is not. You can get people food, so they don't need to be cooking and they can be working more. You have informal ties, you have serendipity, socialization, you belong to a company, you can enforce the culture in the office much more easily. It's an easy way to show hierarchy, who is at the top, who is at the bottom. You can date, you can force people to go out in the morning. It's an easy way to get stationery. It's an easy way to brainstorm. It's an easy way to give inspirational speeches, which is much harder over Zoom, and so on and so forth. So really, the office is a bundle of services. It is covering a bundle of needs. And we don't even understand what all these needs are. And for us to be able to replace it, we actually need to understand each one of these needs and replace with a similar tool, or better, that need. But that has already happened in the past. Craigslist, for example, is a bundle of services. And over the years, each one of them has been picked apart and companies have been created to fulfill that service. The same thing for Excel. Excel is actually a bundle of services because it's very flexible. But each one of these use cases has been unbundled, has been attacked by a different company, and some of them are worth billions of dollars. And the same thing can happen with the Office. Each one of the services provided by the Office is going to be little by little replaced by an online tool. And as these tools get better and better, like Zoom, like Slack, is going to be easier to work remotely. So the market for remote work is going to be bigger. And so there's going to be more companies who want to do it, and so on and so forth. And each one of these services that offices provide is in fact a billion-dollar company. So there's a huge incentive to creating companies for all these services, and we can already see it with the thousands of companies that are being created to replace the office. Something very similar is going to happen with education. We have a massive amount of people studying remotely during the coronavirus, and the question is how fast after these are we going to move to remote work, remote education, and what is that invisible asymptote? And for that, we need to understand what is, again, the bundle of services provided by an education outlet. And my focus is on higher education, universities, and similar. So I think it's interesting to understand what bundle of services is provided by a campus, right? Everybody thinks, okay, most of a campus is for learning, but actually a lot of the value is in selection. Right, a university like Stanford, for example, selects only 6% of the people. So already the people that are coming in are potentially of a higher caliber, and that shows afterwards when they go to work. Certification, certifying that the person has indeed worked for 4 years and has passed everything they need to pass. Signaling, right? If you are willing to spend 4 years or 5 years in college, you are signaling that you believe not so much in yourself that you're willing to not make any money for years and pay for your self-improvement. Belonging, friendships, hierarchy, special interest groups, dating, of course, discipline discovery, right? You get all these new topics that you didn't know about, and you start learning more about them. Intellectual stimulation, challenge, life experience. A lot of people want to go into campus because of the life experience. Obviously, job preparation, job matching, financing, and so on and so forth. So this is one of the reasons why universities and campuses haven't been replaced for centuries, because they are this bundle of services, and they might not be amazing at any of them, but it's very difficult to replace the bundle of services. And so if we think about how they're going to be replaced, I think obviously you have some specific services like Tinder. It's better at dating than campus. So you don't need a campus anymore to go and date. But I think a better example is something like Lambda University, Lambda School. So what this company does is you can come from anywhere. They select you, but you can come from anywhere. You study with them, and at the end, they match you with companies. And one of the keys is you actually don't pay up front. You pay a share of your income for the next few years up to a certain amount. And that's how you pay for the education. So there's no risk whatsoever for yourself. And so what they're doing is, out of a bundle of services, they're picking the few that are key for the core need that the user has, which is getting a job. And they're doing that better than campuses. And so we are going to see much more of that. You can see here, for example, these tweets. I don't know if Twitter has enough server space to handle all the tweets I could post about how Lambda School has changed my life. It changed the trajectory of my life in ways that defy comprehension and the laws of physics. With that level of feedback, you can imagine this is going places. So these are all the needs, and one of the ones that I want to focus on is learning, because people assume that's the biggest and most important of the needs, and they assume that after centuries it's well covered by campuses. But I don't think so, right? You can look, for example, this is what education looks like today, And it very much looks like education decades or centuries ago. You have a person giving the content, then you have the pupils sitting, listening. And now you imagine that if online had worked really well, it would have completely changed that experience. But that's not the case. You go to a place, for example, like Coursera, and you have content organized in weeks. Weeks? Do I need to wait for weeks online to get my content? And then you go and you have a teacher, and a lot of that content from a lot of teachers in Coursera are talking heads. And that might work in a classroom, but it doesn't work if you're in your underpants and you have Candy Crush on the side because you're going to pay attention to Candy Crush if it's boring. And oh, by the way, in this situation, this is an instructional design professor, so this is at the top of learning today. Right? Not only that, but Coursera, you need to pick a session. But on the internet, you need to pick a session for when you're going to study. And there's examples like these of the failure of learning online nearly everywhere. And that reminds me of the history of cinema. This is The Great Dictator from 1940. And this is not really a movie, it's recorded theater. Why? Because at the time, like for millennia, humans have done theater, and they've learned all the tricks to do that really well and make it engaging. So once you have a camera, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to just shoot whatever you know, which is theater. And like, look at how that changes just the year after. This is Citizen Kane, 1941. Right? And you can already see the camera now is moving dramatically. And the composition is key. You have this woman at the center because she's so important. Now you have three planes. You have the people in the foreground, the kid in the background, you have the man in the middle ground. And this composition is telling you a lot of what's happening. You have the two people who are allies on the right and the person who is separated on the left. The person who's separated is not as important, so that person is not in the middle of the frame. He becomes more important, suddenly the camera moves. And as that person loses importance, again, the camera tilts and focuses again on the people who are more important and who won. All throughout, we saw the kid, and now we're going back and we're looking at the kid, and now the face of the woman, who is the most important person, and you want to focus on her emotional attachment. And so this is how movies were completely reinvented based on the new tool. And so the question for education is, what would a true education be like if it was rebuilt for online? What would learning be like? And you probably want to gamify it a little bit. You want to obviously have some video explanations. Maybe you want to ask questions anonymously because you're ashamed of asking stupid questions. You want to celebrate when somebody wins. You want to prove that the content is the right one. You want to have some storytelling, have a sense of belonging, maybe give true actual rewards, maybe give triggers so that people can come back to study, maybe give a good sense of progressions to know, oh yes, I am learning a lot, I feel good about myself. Maybe personalize all that content, and so on and so forth. But what's true is that at some point, learning is going to be better online than offline. And at some point, all of these other services that are provided by a campus are going to be better on online. And so will remote replace offline? I think it's a question of time. Remote will replace online. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us, Tomás, but don't leave us yet, because there is someone else here with us who has some questions for you. Please welcome Juan José Güemes, President of Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at IE Business School. Juan José, it's all yours.
Hi, Marta. Hi, Tomás. Welcome to Enlighted.
Hi.
I hope you come soon to
I'm
Spain
so happy to be here.
and to welcome you at IE University soon.
I hope so.
So, Tomás, you have been talking about disruption in education. How long is it going to take place to be a complete disruption in higher education and education in general?
I think higher education is pretty safe. because it is a bundle of all these services, and we didn't even realize what this bundle of services was. And it's very, very hard to replace each one of these services, right? Learning is probably one of the easiest ones, I would say. Certification might be harder because they rely on a brand, and it's very, very hard to build a brand. Like we're talking about Lambda School. Well, they need to build a brand before everybody trusts them, and that takes a lot of time. And so what I think is going to happen is that some pieces, some of these services are going to be replaced earlier than others, and some of them are never going to be easily replaced. For example, the life experience, it's extremely unlikely that you can create that life experience online. It's very probably hard to create this level of friendships online. And so what I would say is it is going to be faster than we think right now, but especially on some services. That means that the schools that are focused on these services and are now worse than the digital version, those are the ones that are going to disappear. And the schools that play on their strengths, on the things that cannot be done online, and they focus on that, those ones are going to be the winners. But overall, most are going to be losing, the same way as travel agencies lost 20 years ago. Why? Because you build once an amazing travel agency online, and then suddenly all the travel agencies that had a geographic monopoly disappear. The same thing is going to happen online. If you have an amazing experience online that is better, that's going to be better than hundreds or thousands of schools worldwide, then many of them are going to disappear.
So, Thomas, according to Christensen, who unfortunately passed away during this period, we all were confined all over the world. According to Christensen, disruptive innovation is such kind of innovation that makes complex and expensive products and services to be much cheaper and much simpler, and then accessible to the most. So what do you think is going to change in education, in not only the way we deliver education, but also in the financial model, to make it more affordable, cheaper, simpler, and then accessible for the most?
Yeah, it's interesting because Clay Christensen is also the person who is behind modularity theory, which is this concept of bundling and unbundling, right? You have a bundle of services provided by the office, a bundle of services provided by schools, and it gives a sense of when and how is that going to be replaced by something different, by something modular. And the answer is, well, if you can do each one of these services independently, then it becomes much more modular, right? The way a computer, for example, it can be modular because you have the processor and the battery can be a different company, and the montage can be different, and the monitor can be different, right? So once these things can easily talk to each other, suddenly it becomes modular. But when you need all of these things to talk very well together in a way that is not standardized, that is when you have a player that that has a benefit by putting all of this together, right? So that's really the benefit that offices and campuses have today. They have this disparate number of services, and it's very hard to modularize them, just have one and the other separate. And so that's why they've been very hard to replace. I think the two keys, one of them is what you said, the cost, right? Especially in the United States, when it costs you tens of thousands of dollars upfront to get your diploma, and you can go to something like Lambda School, where it's free upfront, there's no risk. There's a huge advantage there, right? And really, that comes from the fact that digital products have very low marginal costs, right? It's a big upfront cost to build the tool, but afterwards, adding one more person is not that expensive. Conversely, in the real world, adding one more student is indeed very expensive. So you have this economic huge advantage that online has to replace offline. And the other one is an educator, for example, because that person is forced on meeting new students on giving a class, on correcting exams, on designing the exam, and that educator needs to do that every quarter or every year, you have very little time to start to think and focus on one amazing experience that then happens over and over again. And that's the other benefit that digital tools have, right? You only need to build it once, and you can focus tens of people on doing that amazingly, and then you put that outside. Which is why I think one of the experiences, one of the things that we're going to experience is superstar educators. We're already starting to see it, but we're going to see more of that. Simon Khan from Khan Academy, in fact, is a superstar educator, right? They create amazing content so good that suddenly everybody consumes that content, and you only need to do it once, not every time. And that's a huge, huge economic advantage.
I'm coming back to your vision of university campuses as a bundle of services. So out of every dollar you paid for tuition to Stanford, your alma mater, how much did you pay for learning? How much did you pay for dating, or for social networking, or for feeling different, or for?
I think the key one here is the common intuition that is completely wrong about how important learning is. And here's a few examples, right? If teaching was so important, if learning was so important, teaching would be extremely important, except that most educators, especially in the US, but across the globe, are not, in the university, are not rated by how good educators they are, most. They are rated by how much research they do and how good the research is. So if learning was really, really, really that important, that's how we would be rating educators. A couple more examples. When somebody can study biology and then start working as a product manager, right, or a designer, these things happen a lot. If the content of what you learned was so important, that would not happen. Yet another example. The income that you get per year of university studied, if learning was the most important thing, that income would grow proportionally, right? You study 1 year, you get a bump of 10% of income. Another year, 20%, 30, 40%. That's if learning was important, was the key. But what we see is that actually it does not grow linearly, it grows like this. You have a little bump for the first year, and then the second one a little bit more, then a third. But the time you graduate is when you get the really big bump. That makes no sense. Well, it makes, because one of the key reasons why you're studying is actually not to learn. It is to prove that you can go day in, day out for 4 years and do whatever you're told in knowledge work, and study something, understand something, and pass the exam. And that is the skill that you want for work. And so if you prove that for 4 or 5 years, you can be doing whatever you're told, that's what the certification says about you. And so that's why the certification is much more valuable, in fact, than the learning. So back to your point on the value from Stanford, I think one of the key values of Stanford is actually the selection. It's around 5-6% in the MBA of people who get selected. And then you have an amazing group of people all in one place, and you can let these people do whatever they want because they're going to be overachievers no matter what. And so the selection is massive. The certification is not as important. It matters, but it's not as important. The learning, for me, was very valuable, but it's definitely not the biggest one. I think the stamp of hiring Stanford is probably the biggest one. And then close to that, the social networks. Just this selection of people, when you're all of us together in one place and you get to know these amazing people, that inspires you, that gives you ideas, that gives you tools and contacts, obviously, for your professional life afterwards. So I would say selection, certification, and social networks were by far the biggest values. Learning was here, and other things like dating, not so much.
And which of those services will be provided in campus, and what others may be taken over by new players in the industry of education?
Yeah, I think the, 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 what scares me the most about higher education is that some of the biggest values, the things that are most valuable, can be replaced relatively easily. So the underlying reason why people go to university usually is for income. They want a job. And what they learn, the certification, the selection, is valuable for that. And so you take something like Lambda School, and I think the bundle of services that they picked is very, very clever. It's very focused on the job side. It's telling you within a few months, I'm going to get you from wherever you are to this place where you're going to make substantially more money. It's focused on the job. And so if you, and they're doing all the services that you need to do that well, right? They're teaching you, obviously, but they're selecting. There's a huge selection to participate in the program. There's amazing financing, and they're very, very focused on placing students in companies, and they're doing that really, really, really well. And so you have these institution that has been really intelligent on the subset of the services to replace. And my guess is there's going to be more like it, and also it's going to keep growing really, really, really fast. And so the question becomes for other higher education organizations, like what can they do to fight this? And back to Clay Christensen, one of them is going to be, they need to understand that they're going to be disrupting themselves. They need to be disrupting themselves in one area. And the second is they have to focus on the areas where they're the strongest. And offline is strongest in the human connection. And so focusing a lot on who you meet, creating amazing experiences, creating lifelong relationship and friendships, creating an amazing network of alumni. These things are going to be harder to replace online. And I think the winners are going to be blended education, but the offline piece of it is going to focus on that.
Okay, Tomás, and my last question is to give you the chance to be a little bit provocative. In 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, there will be more or fewer universities, and how universities will look like.
In 5 to 10 years, there's definitely going to be fewer universities. All the ones that won because they had just a geographic monopoly, meaning that they get the students from their area, all of these are going to lose. The ones that made a lot of money, for example, from foreign workers, from foreign students, or from local students, it's going to be harder for them to compete when you have a product that's strictly better. I think the ones that are going to survive are the ones that have an amazing brand, like Stanford's, Harvard's, École Centrale Paris in France, for example, Polytechnique. As the top 1%, 2%, 3% of students want to go today, in 5 years, the brand is still going to be very valuable. So even if your addressable market shrinks by 50%, you still have the top that still wants to go to these schools. I think the ones that are going to be replaced are the ones who are, for example, more like focused on specific jobs, such as a computer developer. That's one of the groups that Lambda School is targeting. And more importantly, those where they have this geographic monopoly.
Thank you very much, Tomás. May the 4th be with you. And I hope to see you soon in Madrid or Asturias pretty soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Franco. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Juan José, Tomás. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us. Estamos llegando al final de una semana llena de revelaciones, llena de ideas brillantes. Y ya sabéis que toda buena historia acaba con un gran final. Para clausurar esta tercera edición del EdTech, 2020, tenemos con nosotros a una figura de relevancia mundial, Premio Princesa de Asturias de Cooperación 2019 y un auténtico abanderado de la innovación educativa. Estoy hablando del matemático, ingeniero e informático Salman Khan. Formado en Harvard y en el MIT, Salman ha conseguido convulsionar el panorama educativo con la creación de Academia Khan, una plataforma de aprendizaje online gratuita y sin publicidad con más de 72 millones de usuarios en todo el mundo. Su modelo pedagógico se basa en los llamados mapas de contenidos, un software que encuentra conexiones entre temas para generar ejercicios de forma automática. Pero vamos a dejar que sea el propio Salman Khan quien nos lo cuente. Es todo un honor para mí poder saludar a Salman Khan. It's an honor to have Salman Khan here. Part of Enlightened's philosophy focuses on giving importance to innovation applied to education. So being able to close this event with him is a privilege. Welcome to Enlightened 2020. Sal, tell us, what can we expect for the future of education?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. That's a big question that I think a lot about, but I encourage everyone to take anything I have to say with a grain of salt, because it's always hard to predict the future. But I'll tell you what I think we know. So even before COVID hit, there was some basic principles that we have been trying to do from Khan Academy. As you introduced, Khan Academy, we're a not-for-profit. Our mission is free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. It started as really a project for me to tutor my cousins, and I started writing some software for them. And then I started making videos for them, and they told me that they liked me better on YouTube than in person, so I kept going. And so by 2009, it was a real organization. I had quit my job. And there's always been three pillars to Khan Academy. The first is, can we make all of the material from pre-K through elementary, middle, high school, and college available for free for anyone in the world, in all of the world's major languages? And that kind of introduces this idea that everyone has access and that learning should not be bound by time or space. The second pillar that we've been advocating for and trying to build to enable is, if students learn something, can we make it so that the learning adapts to the student as opposed to the student have to adapt to the learning? In a traditional academic model, what happens, and this is the schools that you and I grew up in, we'll have a lecture, then we'll have some homework, lecture homework, and then 2 weeks go by, and then we might have a test. And then on that test, let's say that I get a 70%, you get a 90%, even though we have identified gaps on that test. I didn't know 30% of the material that happened to be on the test. You didn't know 10%. Even though we identify the gaps, the whole class has to move on to the next concept. Probably a concept that builds on those gaps. Maybe I got a 70% on basic exponents, and now the whole class is going to move on to negative exponents or logarithms. Or maybe I only knew dividing decimals 80%, and then when I get to 9th grade, I have to do an algebra equation with that builds on that. And so what happens in a traditional academic model, the class just keeps moving. And so what is fixed is how long and when you have to work on something. And what's variable is how well you learn it. You have your grades, A, B, C, D, F. But the second pillar of Khan Academy, we think that there's an opportunity now where you don't have to make that compromise, where we can let every student learn at their own time and pace so that they have strong foundations, so that they can master the concepts. If we were talking about this 50 years ago, every teacher on the planet would say, yes, I know that when I have 30 students in my classroom, they all have different gaps. They all are ready to learn at different paces. But I, as one teacher, how do I support that? But now we can talk about using Khan Academy and software so that every student can learn at their own pace, master concepts. The teacher is informed in real time where their students are, and then they can do more focused interventions and really unlock the power of human to human interaction to really make sure that every student's needs are served. The last pillar that I'm a big advocate for, and we haven't had a chance to work on this as much, but I think this is going to get accelerated when we talk about the future, is how can someone prove what they know so that anyone in the world will recognize it and they have access to higher education or access to jobs. Actually, the previous guest's commentary really did touch on this notion. So that's what Khan Academy has been preaching, what we've been working on well before COVID. And then you go to March of last year and COVID hits. And this was one of those situations that I think none of us could have predicted. But it was one of those moments where, we kind of looked left, we looked right, And we said, I think this is us. I think we're going to have to step up now, because as soon as the schools started closing around the world, parents, families, teachers, they needed something that's free, that's accessible, that is well proven. There's over 50 efficacy studies on Khan Academy because it's open and it's rigorously researched. And so we saw our traffic go through the roof. We tried to start supporting parents and teachers with webinars and daily schedules. And then, when we started to realize that COVID, and the world started to realize that COVID was going to be a more extended school closures, or that we would have to do distance learning for longer, that's when we realized that, one, we would need to accelerate a lot of the parts of the vision that I just talked about, and that the world was going to be fundamentally different post-COVID. It's not that it would have changed the trajectory, but I think it accelerated the trajectory. So learning should not be bound by time or space. COVID has made that a reality, that learning cannot be bound by time or space. The idea of being able to give more, put more on students to have the independence to learn at their own time and pace. We're seeing that in COVID. We have to do that because all of the work that kids are doing are in the home environment. This idea of competency-based learning, regardless of how you learn it, regardless of how long it took you, the fact that you can get to a well-defined endpoint, this too is being catalyzed by COVID, because students are being able to engage at different levels. And the other thing that COVID is putting a big spotlight on, everything I talked about pre-COVID, one of the main barriers has always been the digital divide. As soon as COVID hits, we see the digital divide, the fact that middle income and upper class families have internet access, while low income families around the world tend to not have sufficient internet access. And so with COVID, I think the whole world has realized that the digital divide is unacceptable, that it's like having people in your city who don't have clean drinking water or electricity or heating, that this thing needs to be closed. And so what I see happening over this time period, over this COVID time period, which is likely to last for another 5-6 months at least, is that finally people are taking the digital divide seriously, and that's going to accelerate the fact that learning shouldn't be just bound by time or space. We're seeing a whole generation of teachers being thrown into the deep end of the pool with technology, which is very uncomfortable, and they're doing heroic efforts. But what the side effect of it is going to be that they're all going to be much more comfortable with technology after COVID is over. And so the frictions of adopting these technologies are going to be lower. You have a whole generation of parents and students who have now taken more ownership over the students' learning, which I think is going to be one of the major trends of the future. And people realize that with all of the gaps forming, people have been talking about a K-shaped recovery in the economy, that the people in the upper class are doing fine, but people in the lower incomes are doing worse. We're seeing a K-shaped recovery in education as well. A lot of middle income or upper class families, their kids are able to learn just fine. It's still a suboptimal for them. But with the families that don't have digital access, maybe they don't go to well-resourced schools, they are falling further and further behind. So as we get out of COVID, hopefully the digital divide is going to be addressed. You have parents that are more involved in schools, teachers who are more familiar with technology. And because of the gaps that formed, you're going to have, I believe, a more focused effort from the global education system on how do we fill in students' gaps. And that goes all to personalized learning. You can't just say, okay, let's not pretend like the last year happened and then just keep going with the motions of what we were doing before. We have to really think about how do we fill in those gaps. And so as you go forward, the future, I see a world, let's say 5 or 10 years, where Khan Academy is already available in 46 languages around the world. Our Spanish Khan Academy is one of the most built out ones, but you're going to be able to have all the academic material from pre-K through the core of college available for free for anyone in the world. It's going to be available in a way that's personalized. It's going to be localized. It's going to be available in probably by that time all of the major world languages. And you're going to have ways to prove what you know. And that evidence, some students, it might take them 2 weeks. Some students, it might take them 2 years to say they have proved that they have mastery in, say, finance or computer programming or writing or calculus. But that evidence is going to be used for higher education, or even to the previous conversation's point, it could be used for jobs or be used for apprenticeships. And the last point I want to make about the future, because, I think we always inherently view technology as part of the future. And I am someone that a lot of people associate with technology and they associate with online learning. But I want to be very, very clear. If I had to pick between an amazing teacher in person for myself, for my children, for anyone's children, versus the most amazing technology, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, whatever, I would pick the amazing teacher every time, because you're not going to be able to replace that human connection and the ability for a human to connect with each other, empathize, and really motivate in ways that no technology is going to be able to do. So for me, it's never about technology first. It's always about what's our goal. And our goal is we want to form human connections. We want education to be a interactive experience, interactive from a human point of view. We want to maximize human to human conversation. We want to maximize personalization so that students don't feel checked out because the class is way ahead of them, or they don't feel bored because the class is behind them, that they feel engaged because things make sense to them, that it feels relevant to them. And then when you know what you're trying to do, then you say, what are our tools? Well, the teacher is the number one resource for students. And then the second resource is the community of fellow students. And so technology should be in service to that. Can technology facilitate ways for the students to engage with each other, maybe do peer-to-peer tutoring? Can technology facilitate for the students to learn at their own time and pace, get a lot of practice, get a lot of feedback, get lessons, so that it frees up teachers' time so that when they're in the classroom, teachers can take 5 kids aside and do more focused interventions while the other 20 or 25 keep working, or pair up 5 or 10 kids with each other so that they're able to tutor each other. There's a lot of evidence that tutoring, even from peers, is highly, highly effective, much more effective than just sitting and listening to a lecture. And so, and the last thing I'll say is a lot of the conversation around COVID, around how do you make video conference engaging for distance learning? And, the teachers that are doing it well, they're pulling the kids out of the screen. They're making them have conversations. They're putting them into breakout rooms. Every 10, 20 minutes, they're doing an interesting activity. They're creatively using the time. Instead of 60 minutes with 30 kids, they might be doing 10 minutes at a time with 5 kids. So you can get more personal interaction and also less time having to stare at a screen. I think all of these things are going to carry on into the physical world, because those are actually best practices even in a physical classroom. So, I think COVID is very suboptimal. A lot of kids are suffering right now. A lot of families are suffering right now. A lot of teachers are suffering right now. So this is not a good thing. But I think the silver lining is it's going to accelerate a lot of the changes needed to get to what I think in 5 or 10 years will be a very positive future, that if someone even has access to a cell phone, they're going to be able to not only access their potential, learn, but they're going to be able to prove what they know. And at that point, education itself, not just technology, but education itself, is really going to be like clean drinking water or basic shelter, and just kind of this fundamental human right that everyone is going to have access to.
Thank you so much, Sal. Your point of view is always inspiring. But stay with us, because I would like to introduce you to our special guest. They are going to ask you a few questions. And the first one is Carmen Morenés, General Director of Fundación Telefónica. Please, Carmen.
Hello, Sal. Thank you very much for being with us today. It's so important for people all over the world. We have more than 40,000 people that are following at the moment this conference from 44 different countries, and it's an incredible opportunity for them to hear all your experience. You know that we believe from Fundación Telefónica that, of course, teachers is the most important key for students, but technology is also an enormous potential, has an enormous potential to take opportunities to vulnerable environments. And we run a program that I think you know about it, because we talked before last year. We had the opportunity to show you through Pro Futuro that we take quality education to these really vulnerable environments. And we are feeling that many of them are getting a little bit disconnected at the moment, and they need a help. What would you recommend us that we could train, or we could really give the tools to parents and to educators so that anybody is left behind in this kind of environments?
Yeah, I mean, what you're asking is, I think, the ultimate question, because we're seeing that issue around the world, that, we talked about the digital divide, and y'all are doing incredible efforts to close the digital divide. So I really commend you on that. But even when you're able to get internet access or device access, we're still seeing that certain families, the students might not have the supports, or they might not have the savvy to know how to leverage these things properly. So, I love your idea of, maybe there's ways to, there's two possibilities. We've seen some communities where they're, even while distance learning is happening and the teachers are teaching from home, they're using the school facilities in a socially distanced way to bring those most vulnerable students, that 5 or 10% that don't have the right supports at home. Maybe they don't even have, there's not even food security. They need, they need the lunches from the school, to sometimes bring those students, only those students, that 5-10% into the school facility. They can, since it's much fewer students, they can be more socially distanced. And then you can potentially hire someone to provide the supports, including the technical support, so that the kids could be engaged. The other idea is exactly what y'all said, provide direct training for families so that they know not only how to use the technology, but how to best support their children. And, I think every family in the world right now is questioning whether they're doing enough for their children while they're doing distance learning. Even in my own household, we're always worried about, are we doing too much? Are we doing too little? And so I think the more guidance that we can give, especially for families that are, spread thin right now, that are under-resourced, the better.
Sal, as you know, we have students with us today too, and the first one who wants to ask you something is Diego Cubian, a student at the Ramón y Cajal School in Madrid. Diego, please.
Thank you very much. I have a question I would like to ask you. What impact do you think online learning might have in students if it is normalized in the schools?
It's great question. So I personally hope that we don't go, I think 100% online learning or 100% distance learning, I think is a really, really bad idea for most students. Because as you know, when you go to school, yes, you learn how to factor a polynomial, you improve your reading comprehension, you learn your science and your social studies, but there's a lot that happens in between that's arguably just as important or more important. How do you build friendships? How do you collaborate? How do you negotiate through conflict? These are all things that happen in the physical environment that really don't happen in a distance learning environment. And so if we can keep kids, in classrooms in a real physical environment, that is optimal. As I talked about, our dream is always, how do you blend the two? Can you use online tools to support students, support teachers, so that when they come together in the physical environment, you optimize the physical environment even more? In a traditional school setting, the ones I grew up in, most of the time I had to just sit there and listen. I remember sometimes we had to put fingers on our lips so that we don't talk, and we would just listen. And, I think we all remember that wasn't very engaging. Even though we were present in a room together, it was a little bit dehumanizing. But now with technology, you might have an opportunity to unlock that, where if you and your friends are able to learn at your own time and pace, get practice at your own time and pace, when you're in the classroom, the teacher can do more interactive things. Instead of saying you have to be quiet and listen, they should say, I want you to talk. I want you to interact with your friends, because that's the value of in-person learning. You can only do that in an in-person setting. Now, I do think there is some value to distance learning, potentially for part of the overall experience. For example, if you go to a high school and you are really interested in art history, but maybe your high school does not offer a course in art history, maybe for that course, you and maybe 4 or 5 friends who are interested in that subject could do a distance learning course, and they can get on Zoom and they can do that at a distance. That could be a positive. We've seen examples of, during distance learning in a school district, the system realizing that there's one teacher in the district that gives an amazing lecture on, say, the first unit. Well, if that teacher has really mastered that lecture, maybe that teacher could give that lecture to the entire school district. And that the other teachers are in support of that teacher. So people are still in person, but it's kind of hybrid distance learning. And then for the next unit, it might be a different teacher who's kind of the superstar lecturer for that one. So I think distance learning is an interesting add-on. It's an interesting thing to experiment with, but we definitely, for 99% of students, it would be very suboptimal to go pure distance learning. I hope schools can leverage online learning for blending things, for the personalization. The only other place that distance learning and online learning can be really valuable is as you get older and you're not in formal school anymore, you're working, but you still want to improve your skills. That's where distance learning can be valuable. Or you're traveling. Travel is one of the best ways to learn. So you go on a trip to some other part of the world, but you can still stay in touch with your class or still learn by distance learning.
Sal, I would like to welcome Diego del Alcázar. He is Executive Vice President of IE University. It's your turn.
Thank you, Sal. I'm a huge admirer of yours. Last year, actually, the 18th of October, you were receiving from our Royal Highness, the Princess Leonor, the Princesa of Asturias Prize. And I was at the hospital. My wife was giving birth to my two twins. So besides being an admirer, I also have this very nice memory from you receiving and giving that amazing speech. So at our university, we truly believe, as you say, that customization, that technology really humanizes education. Customization really can enhance the learning experience, and from our 20-year experience in liquid learning, we are able now to connect people that are making an internship in New York or that are having a social entrepreneurial project in Cambodia, for example. We can connect them to class. We are actually enhancing their physical experience as well, besides having people face-to-face on campus. So having said this, universities are changing. And you had a full-time on-campus experience at Harvard and MIT. Do you think, or more than do you think, would you like that your kids would go to Harvard to have a 4-year experience as you had in university? Because content and knowledge is something that is king in education, but experience is emperor. And university gives you all that, all the other parts of educational experience that are so important.
Yeah, put simply, I couldn't agree with you more. The value of a university experience, I think the stated value, most people associate education is this is where I go learn a set of skills that are going to be useful for the rest of my life. That is a very important part of any education, especially university education. But there's two other things. There's the credentialing aspect of it. I've always wanted to do an experiment where, let's say you go to Harvard's graduation and you say, look, you find a random graduate and you say, how much debt do you have? Or, I'll pay all of your tuition that you paid Harvard the last 4 years. So you got all of the experience and you have all of the skills, but you're not allowed to tell anyone that you went to Harvard. How many students would take that? I think very few students would take that. So what that tells you is the value of being able to tell people that you have this credential, that you have this diploma is very, 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 very high. And I think if you did the opposite experiment, if you went to someone and you said, you have to pay twice as much money, and we'll give you a Harvard diploma, but you don't get the experience and you don't get the skills, I actually think some people would take that. So, I think in the traditional mindset, the value of the credential probably is more outsized than people realize. What I think is going to happen and what I would like to see, and then I'll tell you what I hope happens for my own children, is, today the message to everyone around the world is the only way to get a middle income or upper middle class kind of income career is by going 4 years. I think things are much better in Spain. In the US, especially at a lot of these private universities, it could cost $50,000, $60,000 per year. So this is an expensive, your cost of a university education, you can buy a nice house in much of the country. So it's a very costly enterprise. And that we also know that for some kids, it works out fine. They get jobs that if they have debt, they can pay that back. But for a lot of kids, they come out underemployed after putting, they might be 30, 40, 50, sometimes $100,000, $200,000 in debt. That's a suboptimal situation. So what I hope and I think is going to happen is universities aren't going to go away. you're also going to have alternative paths. The previous guests talked about some of those alternative paths, things like Lambda School. You're going to have more, where if you want to become a software engineer, yes, you can go to MIT or Stanford and get a good GPA, and that's going to be valuable. Or you could do things like Lambda School, get a job, and that's your decision. But what I think, to your question about what universities can do and what I would want, I think, the 4 years that I had at MIT as an undergrad, for me, were priceless. And the most priceless part of it was not sitting in a 300-person lecture hall. Not that all their classes are 300. Most of the classes were pretty small, but a lot of those introductory classes, there were 200 people in the room. And that you can do that better online through video or whatever. The MIT of the future, and I think MIT and a lot of universities, sounds like y'all are also already moving in this direction, that these lectures that have 50 people and 100 people, even 30 people in it, we don't have to do that anymore. That's not a good use of resources. That's not a good use of time. Everything about a university should be, how do we leverage the fact that we have all of these young people together, all of these amazing professors together? How do we get them to interact with each other? In fact, I think universities should measure that. They should benchmark themselves by how much physical interaction there are between the peers themselves and the teachers themselves. And that really should be their utility function of how much value they're adding as a physical environment, because the skills and everything else that can happen in other settings. And so for my own children, yes, I hope that they can, many of my best friends I met in college and university. I met my wife in university. You can't put a price on that. So I want them to have a very similar experience. But I could also imagine if one of my children said, Dad, I don't want to wait 4 years. I want to, do one of these programs, certification programs, and just start programming immediately or go into finance immediately. I would support them. Or, you could imagine, when we talk about having the amazing experience on a campus, which is true, but, there's other ways to also have amazing experiences. Maybe, a cohort of students, or maybe there's a new type of university where you travel around the world while you learn together, but you're able to leverage some distance learning to make sure you get your skills. That also would be an interesting experience. So I think you're going to see more diversity of experiences, and hopefully the universities that thrive are the ones that really anchor on making the in-person experience as interactive as possible.
So let me introduce you to our next guest. She's Sandra Corrales. She's a student at the programming school E42 in Madrid. It's your turn.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. I have to say that this is the best way of celebrating my birthday. 42 is a community that is 99% face-to-face and is peer-to-peer. So because of the COVID situation, it was very hard to us. And my question for you is, what is the key in Khan Academy that is actually working so well when it's actually 100% online?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm a big fan of 42, and not only what 42 does, but the name. I don't know if people know in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it is the answer to the question of the meaning of life is 42. So I believe that's where the school was named after. But your point is exactly right. Khan Academy by itself, without in-person supports, there's certain students who can use that and learn at their own time or pace. And we get stories from folks all over the world. There was a young girl in Afghanistan, the Taliban keeps her from going to school, and she's able to use Khan Academy from home while she's doing chores to go from a 6th grade level, learn all the math, the science, and she decides that she wants to become a theoretical physicist in the US. She smuggles herself into Pakistan to take the SAT, and then the New York Times finds out about her and writes an op-ed about Meet Sultana, the Taliban's worst fear. And then she's able to get political asylum in the US. And last time I kept track of her, she was doing quantum computing research at Caltech. So there are those people out there that you need to give them at least that level of tools. And if you give it to them, they're going to be able to race and go wherever they can. But even for Sultana, and we know for most people, including myself, you need that plus a real community of learning. Whether it's an in-person learning, ideally the way 42 does it, or, right now because of COVID, we have to do distance learning. And so that's why everything we talk about is our ideal is Khan Academy being used in conjunction with the classroom. And what we hope is to actually turn those classrooms into a lot more like what you do at 42. Everything at 42, as you mentioned, you're doing stuff, you're making stuff, or you're helping each other, and it's peer-to-peer based, or you're working on projects together. That's the way all of schooling can be. And we're hoping that Khan Academy can really unlock that. I have another project that I've been working on that is a complementary to Khan Academy, which touches on this. It's called schoolhouse.world. This is another not-for-profit organization. And this whole point of this is you can learn at your own time and pace and watch videos and get practice on Khan Academy. But if you want live help, you can go to schoolhouse.world, and there's free volunteer tutors who've been vetted who will tutor you on any of the subjects. And we're going to, over time, offer all of the subjects, but it's free tutoring, literally free tutoring for anyone on the planet. And that the way we hope for people to prove what they know is for them to become amazing tutors themselves. You know, if I saw someone's resume and they have straight A's, and then I see someone else's resumes, and in those same subjects, they are well-reputed tutor in those subjects, I would take the person who's the tutor every time, because not only if to teach something, you have to have mastery of the material, and you have to have good communication skills, you have to have empathy for others. So I actually hope that not only helps close the gap on live interaction and live support, but also a new form of certification where the best thing that you can do is become an amazing teacher, and then people are going to want to hire you.
Sal, our next guest is Maria Benjumea. She's founder and CEO of a Spain startup. Maria, welcome again. It's your turn.
It's a real pleasure and an honor to be here with you. I admire you and your work a lot. And you know, from South Summit, what we work is with startups, just like a platform, a connected platform, focused on innovation and to connect all the different actors just for the transformation of society, no? Startups with corporates and with investors. And I lately read something that I like very much from your blog, no? When you say, don't say you are smart to a kid, you celebrate that really you are improving in your learnings, no? And when I read that, I said, that is just how we learned entrepreneurs, no? And how we learn by doing, and how we have to have open mind, absolutely always, and so on, no? And if we talk about entrepreneurs, and if we talk about innovators, you are the most, because there you are with everything you have launched and built during these years, and really absolutely gorgeous for educations. So if one of your kids tell you, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to launch a startup, and what would you say? What would be the learnings? And besides, you work with teachers, with schools. How do you think that really, I think that entrepreneur is key for the development of society and development of economics and everything. What would you say to your kid, and what would you counsel to the schools and teachers?
Yeah, no, a great question. You know, if my kids want to be an entrepreneur, and, you know, I'm secretly hoping they do, because, you know, entrepreneurs are the ones that, you know, kind of redefine the world we're in and create new things. The first thing I would make sure they're comfortable with is to be comfortable with failure. I mean, to your point, failure is a key part of entrepreneurship. And you have to, when you fail, in fact, because you will fail, I failed in more ways than I like to say, you will fail, especially as an entrepreneur. But when you fail, instead of viewing that as a statement about your capability or about your identity, you have to view that as an opportunity for learning. And, you know, there's a lot of research that our brains form the most connections, even when you're learning any subject. When you fail and you reflect on why you failed and you fail forward, you make that failure something that you can build upon. So the first thing I would try to encourage my children is have a growth mindset about it. The second thing I would remind them, because entrepreneurship is it's an emotional roller coaster. You know, you alternate between euphoria and despair. Euphoria and despair. One hour you think you're going to be able to change the world. The next hour you think you're the biggest failure on the planet. And it's very hard. And so you really need some mental tools to deal with this. You know, in ancient Indian philosophy, in Vedic philosophy, there's two types of action, or actually there's three types of action. One is called tamastic, which is kind of chaotic action where you're kind of acting without thinking. But the other two types of action, one is called rajasic. Rajas, it really, the word in Hindi or Sanskrit for king is Raja. And rajasic action is when you do something because you care because of the outcome. I'm going to do it because if I do it, something good's going to happen. Or if I don't do it, something bad's going to happen. And that's how most of us do most of our action. I better study, otherwise I'll get a bad grade. Or if I study, I'll get a good grade. It turns out that type of action, it's really stressful. It puts a lot of anxiety on you because you're so fixated on the outcome. The third type of action is called truthful action, sattva in Sanskrit, which is action where you do what is right, what is the next best thing for you to do, but the outcome is what it is. You accept whatever the outcome is. And I think as an entrepreneur, you really have to act that way, where you say, look, I am just going to do what I think is the best decision, the best action, given the information that I have. And it might work or it might not work. If it works, great, I'll build from that. If it doesn't work, I'm not going to go into depression. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to reflect on it. I'm going to accept it and then move forward from there. And so, not to get too preachy, but the third thing I would tell my kids is meditate. That has helped me a lot too, where I meditate every morning, 30 minutes. And so, as the winds, as I get, I have good days and bad days, but when I meditate, I remind myself, look, Sal, life is short. At the end of the day, this minor setback isn't the end of the world. Your family, your health, these are the things that matter. That's what I think can keep an entrepreneur going. In terms of what to do for the school system, this is, a lot of times when people look at international PISA rankings, they'll say, oh, look at Finland, look at Singapore, they have the best scores, maybe we should be like Finland or Singapore or Shanghai. And first of all, I don't think that's fair because, you can't compare all of Spain or all of the United States versus Singapore or Finland, which is really all of Finland is the size of one big city, or even Shanghai, because not every kid in China is taking those tests. But even more, the test scores actually aren't the important thing. What I tell people in the US, and I am a little bit biased on I tell people in America, I was like, instead of making our school system more like the Finnish school system or the Singaporean school system, we need to make our school system more American. And when I say that, and it's not only American, but one of the associations that I have, my family comes from the Indian subcontinent, and in India, people are very, it's changing, but historically people care how rich was your family, what is, who's your lineage. They care a lot about that. And if you fail, it's stigmatized. Oh, the people talk about you. Oh, so-and-so tried that, didn't work. There's a lot of gossip. While in the US, and especially in, say, Silicon Valley, which is where I live, no one cares what your parents did. In fact, people are proud if they grew up poor. They'll say, hey, I grew up like this and my parents didn't have any money. And, people view that as almost like a sign of honor. And that if someone fails, people say, hey, that was good. You tried, keep going. People really, really respect that. And so I think our school system needs to be more like that if you fail a test or if you get a C on a test, we shouldn't tell you that you're a C student forever, put a C essentially on your forehead. We should tell you, you just haven't learned it yet. Reflect on what you missed and keep going. We're going to give you another shot. That's how you're going to really grow.
Sal, I don't know if our next guest wants to be an entrepreneur, but he's pretty young. He's Javier Lorenzana Orts, a student at the Ramón y Cajal School in Madrid. Please, Javier.
Hi, Sal. You have just talked about poverty and the problems it has. And my question is, how would you bring education to all the corners of the world, especially to those where they don't have enough resources to attend to normal classes? And do you think this will have a disruptive impact in society?
Yeah, what you're describing is exactly why I wanted to start Khan Academy. When we have a mission, free world-class education for anyone, anywhere, obviously, it's great if middle-income folks can use it, because I think even they are suffering from having gaps in their knowledge. And, I've seen even affluent kids have trouble with algebra, not because they're not bright, but because they had gaps in their knowledge and they needed extra support. But the real value of Khan Academy happens when these kids who otherwise would not have had resources, the children that you talk about, are able to tap into their potential. But I think to reach them fully, there will be the sultanas of the world where even if they have nothing else and they just have a cell phone or a cheap laptop and they're able to access Khan Academy, they're going to be off to the races. But my dream is, in 5 or 10 years, pretty much anywhere in the world, you'll have internet access, hopefully, some of these satellites, Starlink that they're putting in the sky, or, groups like Telefonica with the work that they're doing to get, internet access to more and more folks, that in 5 or 10 years, everyone has access, everyone has devices, and that ideally, if you're in a rural village in India or Africa, and, one of the problems is that there might not even be someone within 20 miles who can teach, say, calculus or chemistry or writing, that, there could at least be some place where the kids can go that's safe, where they can have some access, and that they can access Khan Academy. And Khan Academy is there to support them so they can practice, they can learn, they can prove what they know, but they're also part of a community. Maybe there's someone in the village that, a local nonprofit or, that can pay to make sure that the computers are up and running. But I think if we have that type of thing, then, we have a much better shot of having an equitable playing field. One model that I try to live my life by, regardless of whether if we are born again, I don't know what happens after we die, but just imagine you are born again, you're randomly born anywhere in the world. We don't know. You're more likely to be born in India or China in a poor family in a village than we are to be born in Spain or the US in a middle-class family. And so given that framework, how can we selfishly benefit our next version of ourselves, where we're more likely to be born in Africa or India or China? And my hope is that, the things that we can create in 50 years, that if someone is born in that village in India or Africa, that they have at least hope. They have a lifeline so they can learn whatever they need to learn.
And last but not least, I'm happy to welcome again Miguel Barrero. He's a General Director of Fundación Santillana. Miguel.
Hello, Salman. Thank you for being part of Enlighted. It's a pleasure for all of us to share with you this session. I would like to know your view, focus on K-12, so in the schools. Khan Academy is a project based in online and remote learning, something which has been a critical and a key issue in the school lockouts. Yeah? So what role do you imagine for the brick and mortar schools? Do you think it's the time for a hybrid model? And related with this, how is running your own brick and mortar project, the Khan School Lab?
Yeah, so what you're alluding to, 6 years ago, I started a physical school, and I started it because I never imagined that virtual school, that distance learning or online by itself is sufficient. And I was also selfishly motivated. My oldest son at the time was 4.5 years old. So, I've been preaching for the last 10, 15 years, personalization, mastery-based learning, peer-to-peer learning. And so I said, my son and now my daughter and my youngest son, they also go there. They should go to a place like that. But even more, I said, look, in a world where Khan Academy is able to reach hundreds of millions of people around the world, it still might not change the way that a physical school model works. And so, I wrote One World Schoolhouse back in, I'm not trying to promote my book, but, I wrote One World Schoolhouse back in 2012, where, the first third of One World Schoolhouse was, how did the education system globally become the way it is? The middle third of the book was, my story on how I started Khan Academy. And then the last third of the book is, let's reimagine what schooling could look like. There's some things that have nothing to do with technology. Do we need summer vacation anymore? Should school come out at 3 o'clock when most parents have to work till 5 or 6 o'clock? Can we have full year, full day schooling? But also things like, can we do competency-based learning? Can we do mastery, personalization? Can we leverage the power of peer-to-peer? How do we unlock that? And, it's one thing to write all of these things down on paper and to cite research papers, but it's a whole other thing to try to build it yourself. And that was the goal of Khan Lab School. And, now 6 years later, it's a K through 12 school. It's going to have its first graduates. And, it's been really heartening to see that I think a lot of these principles do work, that you can actually give students a lot more independence. And when they do, they can interact with each other more. And, you know, when COVID hit and they had to become distance learning, they didn't miss a beat because the school was always about students having autonomy and then the teachers working in support of that. In terms of, you know, the future of, you know, what is the physical setting about and does hybrid learning make sense? As I've said, you know, the physical setting is incredibly valuable, but we should really double down on what it is. It's a place where we're there together. So we should be interacting when we get on a physical setting together. You know, it breaks my heart when I observe classrooms and all the kids are just sitting like this and they're there physically, but we've all been there. We know that they're not often there mentally. They're looking at the clock, they're daydreaming. Because if you just lecture at 30 kids, half the kids are lost, half the kids are bored. What we need to do is really push the system, leverage online tools, so, you know, hybrid, so that kids can get as much practice as they need. If they need help with a certain topic, they can watch a video. So when you get to class, you're not lecturing. When you get to class, they can do more problem solving. They can get into groups together, work on things together, explain things together, do peer-to-peer learning, have Socratic dialogues, do simulations. So that's the dream. The other benefit of hybrid learning or hybrid distance learning, and we're seeing it now, the school, my Khan Lab school, where my children go, for the youngest kids, they've started to bring them in, but certain families are comfortable with that. Certain families are not right now. So half the kids are there with masks on, socially distanced, and the other half of kids are at home. And the beauty of what's happening now is they're able to still all interact together. And so even after COVID, I'm hoping that, you know, let's say my family, let's say I have a trip to Spain. You know, last year when I had the honor of coming to Spain, you know, I said, I need to bring my kids. They need to see this. This is going to be a once in a lifetime experience. So I brought my kids and they missed school, but that was, you know, in the future, it's okay if they miss school. They can still be with their classmates through hybrid learning. Or if someone is sick or if someone has to do something, they can still stay connected. So I think that's going to be the real power of hybrid learning as we go into the future.
Salman Khan, thank you for your wisdom, for your words, for being here with us in this Enlightened 2020. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Pues muchísimas gracias a Salman Khan, muchísimas gracias también a todos nuestros expertos que han estado aquí con nosotros, muchísimas gracias también a los estudiantes, a los jóvenes, que son el futuro, vuestro es el mañana y vuestros también el día de hoy. Y muchísimas gracias, por supuesto, a todos vosotros que estáis ahí. Ya sois parte de la historia del Enlightened. Muchas gracias por habernos seguido, por haber estado viéndonos a través de las pantallas durante toda la semana y siguiéndonos en directo desde todas las partes del mundo. Cuando cerrábamos el escenario, desde aquí abríamos en Latinoamérica, donde la actividad y la participación por parte de todos vosotros ha seguido durante otras 6 horas más todos y cada uno de los días. Todos los que estáis a ese lado de la pantalla sois ya parte de la historia de este Enlightened. Y por supuesto también quiero agradecer a los socios de Enlightened, Fundación Telefónica, IE University, Fundación Santillana y South Summit. Un año más han apostado por hacer posible un evento que es ya todo un referente en educación, en innovación y en tecnología, y que además este año ha sido así de especial. La verdad es que esta tercera edición del Enlightened 100% virtual ha sido todo un éxito, con más de 40.000 asistentes virtuales de 44 países de todo el mundo. Así que reitero, muchísimas gracias a todos por haber estado aquí con nosotros. Bueno, esto no termina aquí. De hecho, Enlightened acaba de empezar realmente y sigue vivo dentro de nuestra plataforma, que permanecerá activa y que permanecerá abierta para todos vosotros, superthenlightened.education, para que sigamos compartiendo conocimientos, para que podamos disfrutar de todas estas reflexiones, de los talleres, de las conversaciones que se han ido sucediendo a lo largo de estos 5 días. La verdad es que esto es lo bueno que tiene la tecnología. En este momento son las 6:48 de la tarde, aquí en Madrid nos despedimos, pero antes querríamos decir adiós a una de las personas que más han marcado el espíritu de Enlightened. No solo fue ponente de nuestra primera edición, es que además dedicó toda su vida a la educación, a otra forma de educación. Estoy hablando de Sir Ken Robinson. Pocos como él nos han hecho abrir los ojos a la necesidad de revolucionar este campo, a mirar al futuro y a dejar que los niños además expresen su talento innato. Os vamos a dejar ahora con un mensaje suyo que perdura en el tiempo, para todos aquellos que creemos en la educación como pieza fundamental para impulsar la transformación de la sociedad en la que vivimos. Muchísimas gracias a todos. Con este recuerdo en memoria de Sir Ken Robinson, nos despedimos.
I don't think there's a more important conversation to have at the moment than the future of education of our children. We've created systems of education now which are rooted on international competition around particular disciplines. And I think we've got to stop this. We've got to realize that education is about human rights. It's about the lives and hopes and possibilities of our children and the hopes and expectations and security of our communities. Human beings are profoundly, deeply and endlessly creative. It's why we have such complex and interesting cultures. It's the pulse of human intelligence to come up with fresh ideas and fresh ways of thinking. But our systems of compliance actively militate against the very thing that makes us human. Every human life is different and unrepeatable. We have certain things in common, but the hallmark of human life and society and culture and achievement is not conformity, it's diversity. And if we want our communities, if we want our children, if we want our businesses to flourish, we have to think of education in terms of promoting diversity, not conformity. We face existential problems as a species currently with the growth of our technologies, the growth of our populations, and the strains on the planet. And education is a big part of the solution. You know, H.G. Wells once said, he was the great science fiction writer, that civilization is a race between education and catastrophe. I think that's right. If you look at the great cultural problems we face in Europe, if you look at the social problems we're generating, if you look at the economic crises we have to weather, the only way we'll deal with these is by doubling down on developing our sense of compassion, collaboration, and our unique capacities as human beings. That's the big mission for education, and it couldn't be more urgent. Even if we get it right, by the way, we still won't be able to control or predict the future. But we will have a future, and so will our children.